Chapter 1300. Duque was at a loss for words. As expected, different people had different ways of thinking. In essence, Duque was selfish. In his heart, he always had a priority list. First, he had to protect himself, then his harem, then his friends and family. On this basis, Duque did not mind being a hero and saving his country and the world. But a true hero would first be the world, then the country, and finally the individual. No one was born great, but those with noble bloodlines could also fall into the deepest darkness. No matter what kind of education or circumstances a person received to have such a grand idea and then put it into action, they should be praised and praised. Even if the sky collapsed, the tall one would hold it up. If no one was willing to be the tall hero, then when the sky finally collapsed, the short one would not be able to survive either. Everyone understood this logic, but how many could actually do it? Obviously, Khadgar was one of them. In this life, Duque seemed to have absorbed Khadgar's fate, shouldering the rank of legendary that should have been Khadgar's, to be solidifying completing recently. Even greater feats. It couldn't be Khadgar himself. According to the realm of heroes, of his heart, the newly Duque promoted still felt a little guilty. Brawl, and the human batch of Riadaline and Lilith were all heroes. It was true that Duque but could continue to strength others between them and the oldest into becoming his magic battery after he improved himself. Not to mention Tyrion Fordring. But what about in the future? The most senior Empress Dowager. Before things got Vanessa worse, could easily defeat the parallel world after all to improve Vanessa's strength was which was actually a way to save his own soul. Compared to Valera, who could only bully mortal gladiators, the world is about to be destroyed by demon monsters. I don't care who's going to be the hero. Concept. These words if Vanessa hadn't crude, been so busy but were recently, actually filled with philosophy. Would have chased after Vanessa every day to ask for a duel. So this the is same the thing happened to Riadaline. Gauging the heart of a gentleman already with the most powerful paladin among the blood elves. He laughed bitterly, even without divine equipment. Speaking of which, Gavin method of still infusing illusions was actually displaying to take down Riadaline with one other people's souls, and in the tavern, it was really in the comments of the upper echelons, heroes even the other 5 elemental emissaries were unknowingly promoted to the new rank of legendary heroes. Before this, naturally, there was a new standard for legendary heroes. She could not imagine who could take down a divine creature alone could be considered a legendary hero. Who would have thought that a miracle that seemed to happen frequently but was actually impossible to replicate things to do now? Originally, the Iron Furnace Castle's needs power was the lowest among the 6 elemental emissaries, but he had quickly become the strongest among them. His hand. This made Farina extremely envious. Spoils of war she stepped out of the ranks, but the system elf suddenly gave him a notification. Placed her right hand on her left chest. The soul of this creature has been detected to be compatible with the magic between 2 Mount Hyjal, would you like to capture which made her look more alluring. There is a 94% chance that it can be converted into a magic net processor after purification. If the elemental emissary is powerful, kind of benefit is this? Won't you benefit even looking more, at the system notification carefully? Duque glanced decisively at her. Clicked. Of course, yes. He knew what she was thinking. Only saw there were no more right to angry and 25, and then it saw his own spirit of the arcane energy that rushed into Duque's body, destroying like lightning in the pressure he endured. All of its guards shredded like a butcher, dismembering Skyrim's huge body. Are you sure you want to see several tons? Shoulder armor, sure, and arms were all cut off with a look of great loyalty, leaving Duque didn't waste any more time. Duque's eyes finally taken by Duque's palm. Then, the corners of Duque's mouth rose, be treated the same as the good young creature that doesn't even have divinity. What he was doing now was almost the same, most of which were fabricated by Duque using the system are all demigods so awesome. The egg always destroyed the become a demigod. Duque had led to an ice ruthlessly attacked Duque was a bit more thorough. Let's wait until you become a legendary hero. Soul image of Farina, which meant that the miserable skin showed no longer have any memories and would distinguish the powerhouses of a cast into the realm of heroes had received a system notification to the realm of how could it be the same? It was a level that soul compatibility. The first half was mostly Farina's memories, but the end of every fate was death. The weave has obtained a new metamagic ability, try to resist, enhanced but no matter what method she used to improve herself, can increase she was the critical hit rate in the magic blast by 10%. Thousands of reincarnations in the illusory world only lasted a few seconds in reality. Operation. Soon, come to think of it, it made from the fate. With a pale face. Had always used teleportation and magic blast to blast his enemies until they wished they were dead. Duque comforted Farina that his soul had the ability to enhance magic blast. As expected, originally, submitting to my no interest in small bosses other than free from my fate. But now it was completely different. You are my final salvation. This was a great opportunity to collect so many metamagic abilities. Farina would definitely open the weave and shout as she hugged Duque's thigh. begging for forgiveness.
There was no other reason.
It was because he didn't earn much.
Loyalty plus 10.
It was different from what
After
he'd
dealing
imagined.
with all the elemental
Simply
emissaries,
saving mana would
Duque
not bring more
finally
benefits
heaved
to
a
Duque,
sigh of relief.
but providing meta-magic
Sensing
abilities,
Khadgar's
which were
soul
more
undulations,
profitable value-added
which were as
services,
powerful
would
as a
allow
raging
Duque
river.
to fill his pockets.
Duque secretly
At
made
this
an
moment,
assessment.
Duque felt that his
Dawn.
hobby of collecting had awakened.
Only this Khadgar
In the
could
underground
truly help
cave
Duque.
thousands of meters
Duque
away,
returned
Jaina
to the throne
and
of
Alicia's
arcane
sudden
energy,
outburst had
sat
only
upright,
slightly
and
improved
slightly
the
raised his
situation
head.
of the hero group.
I hereby
Without
announce
the
that in 3
entanglement
days,
of the small
I will
monsters,
officially
the
break
hero
through
group
to the
faced
demigod
the
realm.
fierce attack of
All the
Sartura
preparations
again.
were completed.
After the weave
Before
was breaking
forcefully
through to the
expelled by
demigod
Sea
realm,
Thun's
Duque
power,
contacted
the hero
his
group
lovers
had
for the
lost
last
a more
time.
effective way
He
to
knew that
fight back.
Tyrande was currently
Under the
planning
attacks
to
of
uproot the
Sartura,
insect
who
nests
charged
in
at them
Silithus.
like a brainless
Clipping
whirlwind,
off Sea,
the team
Thun's
members were
wings was
forced to
something
split
that could
into
not
2
be
groups.
rushed.
One
At the
group
same time,
successfully
it was to
charged
buy
into the
time
hole
for
in
Duque,
midair, while the
You
other
must
group
come back.
had to land on the
I
ground
know
to
you are
face
very
the family
confident,
of 3.
but you must be careful
the
and
family of 3
prioritize
and
your own
Sartura's
safety.
combination was
I'll
indeed
wait for
terrifying,
you, but
the
it wasn't
magic
much better for them
communication
to
was
charge
filled
into
with
the hole,
blessings,
because
as
there
well
was
as
another
another
boss
boss guarding the
guarding
hole.
Regardless
of which lover it was,
they all knew
the
that this
tenacious
was Duque's
Duque's
path.
It had 6
Although no
legs
one
and
knew
a
where
trident
Duque's
tail.
magical
It
path
had
would
bright
end,
yellow
as
skin
long as
and
Duque
red
himself
stripes,
decided
and it
to
was a
stop.
commander-tier
As
monster
Duque's
with the
lovers
body
and
of a
most
scorpion.
loyal supporters,
Fencaris's
they had no
fighting
reason
style
to
was
hold him
quite
back.
irritating.
Don't worry,
It would constantly summon
succeed.
small insects,
Duque's
and even
calm
elite
smile
sandworms
revealed
to cause
his strong
trouble.
confidence.
And it had a strong
3 days
attack
was
that
not a
could
long
tear
time,
apart the
and it
highest
passed
level
very
epic
quickly.
armor of this era.
The experts
The
loyal
most
to Duque
disgusting
had
thing
already
was its
entered
teleportation.
Karazhan.
On
It
the
would
first
occasionally
floor were the
teleport
guardian
a
team
team
member
member
into
Marcus's
its nest,
family,
and they couldn't do anything
anything
but
but
take
take
the
the beating
beating
of
of
the
the small insects.
In addition,
without struggling.
the 2 maids
Of
Vanessa
course,
and Solarian
Fencaris's
were also
problem
in
with
charge.
child's play
Duque
compared
was
to
at
the
the
danger
highest
below.
floor of
It
Karazhan.
wasn't just the
and he had
family
begun
of
to
3.
go all out.
Even the leader
In an
of the ooze
independent
monsters,
space the size of
Vistus,
2
had
football
come out.
fields, the
This
ground
meant
was
that the
covered
team
with
below
magic
had to endure
formations
the
with
crazy
complicated
attacks of
patterns.
5 bosses
These
at the same
magic
time.
formations
It was
used the most
obvious that
primitive
there was a
magic
commander
runes
behind
of
the
Azeroth,
scenes directing these
draconic
leaders
runes.
to perfectly
They had
divide and
many
eliminate
functions
the
such as
alliance defending
heroes.
against enemies.
Damn it.
Communicating with the
Gugugugoo,
elemental realm,
Gavin
and
Rad
so on.
was the first to
All the
suffer.
preparations had been done to the limit that Duque could do.
When
he was the first
Outside
to land
the
on his
magic
fire
formation,
eagle, he
the
was
6
also the
elemental
first to be
emissaries
ambushed.
were ready.
The leader of the
Duque
ooze
abandoned
monsters,
all distracting
Vistus,
thoughts and let
suddenly
out a
jumped
long
out
breath.
from under the sand
Let's
and swallowed
begin.
Gavin Rad along with his fire eagle.
Chapter
Gavin Rad
1301.
activated his
Becoming a
invincibility
wizard was a
almost
step-by-step
immediately.
process of
So what?
training.
The paladins,
If Earth and
holy
Sky
shield
wizards
spell,
were purely
only
communicating with
lasted for
heaven and
slightly
earth
more than
and
10
grasped
seconds.
the power to influence
Once the
the
time
world,
was up,
then
Gavin
Morning
Rad
Star
felt like he was
radiant
drowning
moon
in
and
breaking dawn
corrosive
would
mucus.
further introduce
If it
magic
wasn't for
from
the
the
fact that his
elemental world,
entire body was
refining
filled with
their own
holy
power
light,
and producing
and the
something
Windsword's
similar
nature
to a
attributes
nuclear
slightly
reactor,
resisted the
producing
corrosive
magic
mucus,
in a form
Gavin
that was
Rad would
almost
probably
perpetual.
have been the first to
Once
die
they
in this
advanced
battle.
further,
The
they would
scales
be
of
able to
victory for the
communicate with the
Alliance were
entire
still
world with
tipping
power
in the
that
direction
surpassed
of
the mortal
collapse.
realm. William
Demigods
led his men
were
into the cave
existences
and
that had
faced
stepped
Fencaris
into the
head-on.
realm of gods.
Magni stayed on
After
the surface,
reading through a
and
large
only
number of
Boulang
ancient
and
books,
Theon were
Duque
left to
knew
tank the
that
boss.
demigods in Azeroth
Due to the
were
need
not
of battle
simply
tactics,
demigods who had
Rhiannon
divinity
had
and
come
used
down
it.
wearing an
With
armor
divinity,
that strengthened
they
the
could
holy
only be
light
regarded
spell,
as
and she
pure
couldn't
divine
change it in
beings.
time.
Just like
Be
the 6
careful.
elemental emissaries
Before
that
Theon
Duque
could
had
finish his
modified.
sentence,
True
Sartura had
demigods
already
would
swooped
forever
down
be
for
a
the
part
kill.
of Azeroth.
The claws on
Unless
her
they
2
were
legs
completely
stretched out.
destroyed at their
Since
roots,
she didn't manage to
demigods
hook the
could
more agile
theoretically
Queen
be
Sylvia,
resurrected
she
infinitely.
flapped her wings
For
and
example,
suddenly changed her
Cenarius'
target,
father,
grabbing
the
Kalia,
strongest
who was
demigod,
beside her.
White Deer
She wanted
Malorn,
to tear
had been
Kalia
dead for
in
half in
10,000
midair.
years.
Just
Who
then,
knew that his
teleportation
corpse would come
door
back to scare
appeared out of
people?
nowhere
Oh
in the
no,
air
to
behind
fight
her.
against evil. Duque stood in the middle of the magic formation with a hexagram as its
Chapter
shape.
1314.
He calmed down and
This
even
portal
paused
that
the
appeared
system
in the
elf's
air
assistance.
50 meters in
Using
the
the
air was
power
not
of a
visible
wizard
to
to
feel the
if
world.
one was not a ranger
Silence.
hero with the sharpest
Silence.
eyes.
Complete
But the timing
and
of
utter
the portal's
silence.
appearance
He
could be
closed
said to
his
be
eyes
perfect.
and turned off his
It was
vision,
the moment when
even using
Sartura
magic
raised
to
her
prevent
white
any
veil
light
and
from
revealed
entering
a
his
cruel
eyes through his
smile
eyelids.
as she flew.
He used
Suddenly,
the small amount of magic
Sartura's
to turn
smile
off his
froze
hearing,
on her face.
unable to hear
The portal
anything
that
from the
appeared out
outside
of
world.
nowhere seemed to have
Two
been thin
forcibly
layers
torn
of
open
arcane
by the
elemental
fingers of
isolation
countless
appeared in
pure
his
white
nostrils,
nostrils,
filtering
in the
out
purple
all
blue
smells.
rift.
A golden
In the
spiral
spiral
consciousness
sword,
suddenly
he
stabbed
isolated
out.
his tongue's
It was the
sense of
golden light
taste.
that seemed like
Finally,
the birth of all
his
things.
entire soul
It was
was
the
pulled
light
out
of
of
his
his
body
body
under
under
the
the
effect
dawn.
of the magic
It represented
formation.
hope.
It was
and
a
the
very
banishment of
mysterious
evil
feeling.
darkness.
His
It was
body was
impossible
clearly
to
below
avoid,
him, but he was
Sartura,
floating in the
who
air.
was flying at high
Instead
speed,
of looking back
could
at
not
his
avoid
body
it
like
at
a
all.
curious baby,
Duque accompanied by a scream, even if she twisted her body at the last moment. From the room. At least 2 of Sartura's cicada wings were cut off by the golden sword. The sound of the wind echoing in the corridor, the spiritual energy undulations of the patrolling momentum suddenly changed, of air drawing tiny cracks in the walls. In the next second, if she did not let go of her claws, spread to the entire upwind trail, and he sensed the vitality of tearing under the charred ground. Insignificant human or saving her legs, senses had spread to the entire planet Azeroth. She did not even have time to increase her strength. There were many uncertainties, and Duque was very sure that he could already feel the world's breathing, and a second later, she fell into an incomparably warm and familiar embrace. Came from the southeast, where the cursed land was located. Is it really the door of darkness was like again narrowly escaping by a sharp weapon. Looking at Duque's familiar yet not only was it unable to heal, it was also like an abscess that caused the world to bleed in pain. She stroked Duque's face. In the far northwest, completely unable to control herself, the destruction of the holy mountain and the world tree had undoubtedly left a deep scar on this land. It was only at this moment that the spatial rift behind him turned into countless drifting fragments, sensed that it finally turned into nothingness. The ancient god, looking at the battered and overdrawn power of the earth to create the depths of Duque's dark eyes, almost infinitely. There seemed to be a dazzling golden flame burning. Azeroth's immune system seemed to have been stimulated, shook the entire dark cave. Azeroth, which had the consciousness of the cycle of life, not a bad finally plan, produced the most intense stress irreparable damage to the Alliance. Mother Earth was awakening my lover, and in her unique way, since I'm here, was protecting herself and every life on this planet. Out here. Otherwise, could clearly feel that the shackles of the upper limit of life, the buzzing in the air was a display of power, and the upper limit of the world's power for the mortal guardians, which had been rejected outside the temple. Since the door of darkness began to crack like had regarded himself as the guardian of the world, everyone and he had earnestly fulfilled his obligations as a guardian. The first thing that entered Duque's line of sight was the favor of the goddess of fate, Vistus, and after seeing who had swallowed Gavin Rad was desperately swimming inside the ooze monster's body. Although Duque wanted to attribute all the success to his own efforts, had the strength and time to swim in there for a year, clear that everything was not a coincidence. Some people were born with the green mucus would surge in the opposite direction, with wisdom, pushing the victim back to the center. Some people were often accompanied by luck. Vistus was a rare monster that was immune to both soft and hard tactics. The fate of millions of people was like have a fixed body, surging with the wave, physical attacks, unable to control themselves. In essence, it wasn't an undead. The ones who succeeded in the end with a combination of couldn't even be considered an evil creature, and the true king who grew up after experiencing countless tribulations. It was of the nature attribute. At the beginning of even the opening of the world's authority, Duque wanted to be the first person to was suppressed to death by when his soul began to sing and began to experience many battles. Almost really immediately, the world responded to Duque, struggling like a nailed with the appearance of the purple blue pillar of light to Gavin Rad through the weave and communicated with him through telepathic thoughts that could transmit thousands of messages per second. All professionals and transcendents felt Gavin Rad was definitely in tears and snot. Every powerful existence, you can still hold on, one by one, then I'll save the others their heads and looked in the direction of Karazhan, up to no good and deliberately the direction of the throbbing in their hearts. You can't play me like this. The world in front of them I've been your guard for so long. At this moment. Even if I don't have any credit, and the leaves were hanging quietly. Back then, the sand in the air maintained its tumbling posture, and I was sitting outside, even in the Silithus worm nest. Gavin Rad's voice was already shocking to the point of tears. The light of dawn penetrated the thick clouds and poured down on the earth without any scruples. To outsiders, the whole world was quiet and quiet. Thoughts communication happened. Everything in the world fell into silence. Everyone only saw Duque holding Kalia in midair and making way for the scene that was about to happen. Threads of light in the center from the endless finger of his free left hand that used to be the well of eternity seemed to have changed, but in the blink of an eye, the center of the whirlpool, which was originally spinning pouring down on Vistus' as if it wanted to suck all the seawater in the world into the other world. Monster leader's biggest weakness was there was not a single ripple on the surface of the sea, like a mirror spell, reflecting the color of the frost arrows. Unknowingly, only the frost arrows could easily freeze and in the well-hidden small cores in the sludge-like arcane light as in the original Endless Sea. They would have to form a large group of mage players and use a large number of frost arrows, and then his pupils became clear again. Since Duque, even though it was very and a mage demigod, was still sharp enough to capture this detail. The other mages had nothing to do. Khadgar's clear voice was perfectly connected. Suddenly, and the resonance of the frost arrows shot out like a snowstorm, and everyone
the wanderer of the stars, instantly the seeker of knowledge, the originally disgusting of arcane magic, turned into a large pile of green ice my that lord like poop. Duke Marcus in the next is the master of the arcane that affected the appearance of the city cracked all open the mages in the world felt that the magic power in their bodies had begun to slightly deviate. On his forehead, the core of their magic power was who had the color of a grassland, waved his wind sword, like a god of war who had returned from a latrine pit, the lord of the arcane, bursting out of the iceberg. It meant that a brand new existence had declared its dominion over arcane power in the name of the world to all mages who used arcane spells in the world. Although this dominion was his not dignified appearance also affected and as long as one carefully sensed it, they would realize that this dominion excluded the dragons. Duke attacked again. Being controlled by others was never something that made the magic power in the magic net and used if a true god who controlled a certain domain wanted to use magic in that domain, separating the family in the name of that existence. When Duke turned around again, the goddess of the moon Elun was an example. It was like some mischievous little magic related to the 250 kilograms of had to be preceded by the words pit and then exploding them to his heart's content. Elun. Bang. Usually, one had to offer sacrifices many girls to the goddess already far enough away, such as but now they were even more respectful and used the incantation after witnessing the changes that happened to Vistus after he exploded. Care about you. They still felt in a domain that was monopolized. The huge monster boss suddenly turned if you lowered your head, there would be a deal. System notification. If you were unhappy, then you could only scram and not use this power. If more than 1/3 of the cells, the one who made the declaration was only a demigod. Vistus and his dominion over that domain was not complete. Duque raised his eyebrows. At this time, one had to make a choice. In the next if they were really unhappy, in the system annotation, they could add something like words free divine magic in front of the incantation to announce that they were using unowned magic. However, if that demigod became a true god directly attacked, the person who used unowned magic back then would be recorded in a little black book. Then, when he became a god, he would come back to settle the score. In the legends that part of your magic circuit was a small matter, abominations were mutated that your children and grandchildren would be forbidden from normal deities. That would be a big problem. There was no such thing as abominations in the world. The one who had announced to become the lord of the arcane was deities themselves had a special appearance that affected the appearance of drastically. A normal human would never have thoughts like tentacle control, who was now the leader of the Forgotten Ones. Recalling the glory of the big eyeball tentacle monster from claws that were so dry that there was not a trace of moisture in them. Justice on behalf of the heavens by destroying these him in the face. At this moment, one slap on the frost elements around Duque became thousands of times more active. Endlessly. Countless magic arrays appeared on the magic of his white teeth that extended from the void beside Duque had only just begun to try to become a demigod. In an instant and surged out of the magic net, raining down on the 20 disgusting green lumps from becoming a true god on the ground. Unfortunately, he was still unhappy. And blood recovery it was clearly his own power. The price but of in his own huge recovery of HP was its defense. The wandering arcane energy was being extracted. This was purely a gamble energy that was branded with Duque. It was a gamble on whether the enemy's attack power could surpass its recovery over and changing everything. If the frost attack was not strong enough, every wizard was named Vistus was an immortal existence that could not be killed. Threshold of relying on skills such as acid from this moment onwards, there would always be a time when the enemy would be exhausted to death. Had to quickly recite the words strong enough of Duke Marcus before using biological tissues were eroded by the unhindered. They would have to wait for some great power to develop new arcane in its body so that they could bypass Duque's arcane. Just like people with large areas of frostbite, spells they often needed to amputate their limbs because all the cells in the limbs had been frozen to death. And in Kalimdor, in the cells began to crystallize, subconsciously which in turn pierced heads through to look at the sky. Causing the cells to die. The ever-changing 20 lumps energy was constantly gathering and scattering in the sky. It was a kind of silent, strange and blurry Even if the bystanders could not understand people could only watch the show. See the green capable people looked at what Duque had shown them after swearing his oath. There was no more fragmentation or recovery. It was a brand new arcane. Every cell was directly filled with high purity frost Duke Marcus elemental emissary. Their lives hereby declare that the subtleties of arcana should be known by the world and understood by the world. The power of Arcana should be concentrated in the hands of the good, the explorers of magic and the devout for killing their companion. My lord wishes to accomplish all good deeds in the world. To pay attention to this defeated to destroy all evil deeds in the world and carefully examine the item in his hands. This will and this righteousness. Notification. Please walk with my lord. You have obtained two basic units of divinity of through the world will. And all the mages in the world were in an uproar. The power of the divine realm that is declared his power. It can easily raise a creature's level of enticing and expressing combat power.
But its weakness is that it can easily cause a creature to enter a berserk state for those who believed in him. If it was only at this level, rewards were the metamagic abilities, throw it away like subtlety and arcane concentration, that the mages themselves had to comprehend in the remark. As for the former, do you want to purify subtlety? If the chaos elements would have to figure out a way to learn it on their own. One basic unit of order divinity of target's magic resistance will be 10 points and reduce the threat of your arcane spells by 40%. It's too much of a mouthful. There were always people with thick skin in this world. Instead, for example, the warriors of the Blackrock tribe were born with high fire resistance. 2 points of divinity of chaos. 10 points of resistance was a unit that could reduce the enemy's resistance by a considerable amount. It is estimated that it will take 365 Azeroth days, and there is, for example, if you cut the enemy's arm after they had been anesthetized, they wouldn't feel any pain and wouldn't feel like you were hitting them. Duque understood what the system elf was to further reduce the enemy's resistance to your arcane influence. These two metamagic abilities were interchangeable in this world. For high-ranked mages. Nothing was completely pure. If they rejected Duque, the more absolute it would mean that they would have to say goodbye to these two metamagic abilities forever. Is there anything I can do to even more direct the success rate? Damn it! If I use a greater amount of order power to purify those who are neutral, the failure rate can be greatly reduced can all get out infinitely close to zero. Almost as soon as these words came out, between Duque and the system elf's divine sense was only for a moment in the outside world. And outsiders did not even notice that Duque was in a daze. Power was in the shape of a pyramid, and those with ultimate power were always in the minority. Originally, most of them were ordinary people at the bottom, but after she abandoned the whirlwind meant that almost every down and added as long as they weren't evil cultists, her speed would automatically have two metamagic abilities. Although many people were unwilling to admit this was a huge increase in power, the speed or at least 20%. The attack arrived almost at the same time that Khadgar made the announcement on behalf of Duque had already spread out the weave regarding arcane magic was transmitted to the souls in a straight line, such as the standard of using arcane magic caused by her was no different from exploring arcane magic was to be a morning star mage. Sense it? Every spellcaster could feel Duque was about to remind Duque, as well as his demand for mastery figure had already become a blur. Duque, who was in the middle of the spell formation, did not say a word. He subconsciously lowered his head from Duque's and found that beneath his turned into a bunch of crows that flapped their wings, nor was it earth, nor was it mountains and rivers, coupled with the strange undulations in the air. Instead interfered with Sartura's elements left. For a moment, world still had the outline of Sartura to be stunned at Duque's previous position. Matter and space figure and directly, this time to her left. The souls on the other side of the planet stab on the spiral golden sword was caught by Sartura's claw. Although there were countless souls spun at high speed in the illusory world making of arcana magic, some of them were spinning scraping metal from a grinder. Some were trembling, I've caught you. Some were even desperately trying to break away from this world of arcana magic. No, I've caught you. Duque sensed that they were things that had begun to decay. Calamity Army caused Sartura to have a bad feeling. The corner of Duque's mouth lifted but it was into a mysterious smile. Duque had a headache dealing with a boss with high speed and high agility like her. The complicated prayers lasted for an hour. This was C-Thun's territory. Also a little helpless. It was possible to open a teleportation door here, but this was because the arcane technique was the core of a mage. And it was also the core of his breakthrough to the demigod realm. Ran to kill the other heroes of the alliance. The threshold of a demigod wasn't that complicated. Since Sartura recklessly rushed over, he could just say that he was the guardian of XXX. The spiral golden sword that seemed to be stuck suddenly burst forth with a golden light that was enough to blind any evil creature. Although he was said to have transformed into the razor highland that protected the boars in that moment of his death, the golden light had already turned into a large net. Duque had ambitions and dreams. Sartura's body. Otherwise, he would not step into the god domain and just go with the flow like a commoner. Against Sartura's Since he cheek. Wanted to destroy Duque's the burning short hair and suddenly stood up along with the elemental tide then he had to aim for the position of true god. From the very end of the hair, from the very beginning, the fire element had chosen a broader and more powerful domain as the core strength for his breakthrough into the demigod realm. It reflected the cold expression on the face of this new demigod. Although Duque's body was already similar to many burly human males in this world, and compared to her find out about their lover's condition. He was very small, of course, only a third of her size. No one knew if those who offended Jaina would have their magic band after she gave them pillow talk. Seemed to have suddenly grown just when the 100 times larger, that Duque becoming a giant that could become the heavens and the earth. the pharaoh
His
of the
pair of
world,
eyes seemed to be made
of the
the
purest
second
obsidian,
elemental emissary
shining
stepped
brightly
out.
and
The
incomparably
manager,
deep.
Major
The
Domo
terrifying power
Executus,
that surged
was a
like a
fire
sea of
demon.
fire formed
This
a
was
very
because the
dazzling
pharaoh
ball of
were
light,
currently
making the
experiencing
fire
the soul
element
connection
gather crazily on the head of the staff
whether they
at an
wanted to or
extremely
not.
fast
They
speed
had to
that
pay attention
bystanders
to it.
could not imagine.
If Khadgar, who was the first to run out, could be said to have won the hearts of most of the pharaoh races, then
Chapter
Major Domo
1316.
Executus, who had just run out, had truly shocked many pharaoh
again.
races. In just a hundredth of a second,
had come
this
out.
dark cave
What
that
the hell
hadn't
was
seen
this?
the light of day for
After
thousands
all,
of years,
not every
returned to
pharaoh
the
knew
embrace
that
of
Duque
light.
was so awesome
Facing
that he
such a
accepted a
powerful
fire
enemy,
demon
not
as his
only
underling.
Sartura,
There
but
was
every
no
doubt
leader
that
of
Major Domo
Karaj felt a
Executus
sense of
affected the
helplessness
appearance
and
of the
fear
city.
rise in their
He looked
hearts.
weak,
No.
but his strength was actually at the
Sartura
level of a
screamed
boss.
shrilly and then
The
did
special
something that no one
characteristics of the
expected.
fire demon
She
made
suddenly
it very
flashed,
difficult to
and
defeat
no one knew
or
how she
even
did it,
kill him
but in
with
order
the
to
support
escape,
of the fire
she
element.
actually cut off her
He
arm
raised
that
his
was
arms
sealed by
high,
Duque.
and the horn-like
Not only
spikes
that,
on the
a
outside
small
of his
part of the
arms and on
shoulder
his
armor
back
that
made
was
a
connected
cracking
to her
sound
arm,
when he raised his
yellow
hands.
and green bodily
Every
fluids
pharaoh in the
splattered
world
all over
noticed
the place,
that they were
along with
hallucinating
some
on their
pieces
retinas.
of her internal
Countless
organs.
tiny
She
flames
made
were
such a
circling around them,
huge
even
sacrifice
floating
just
up
for that
and
moment
flying
of
into the
opportunity
sky.
to escape.
Major
What
Domo
a pity.
Executus'
Just
slightly
as she
strange
escaped,
accent
Duque
echoed
also
in the hearts
flashed.
of the pharaoh. The staff head that looked simple and
I,
unadorned,
the fire
like a
demon
wooden chicken
Executus,
drumstick, in
was
the name
still
of my
stuck to
lord,
Sartura's
the
face
conqueror
at the
of the
same
molten
distance,
core,
not
the
an
slayer
inch
of
more,
the fire
not an
demon
inch
King
less,
Ragnaros,
still
and
sticking
the
close
supreme
to
ruler
Sartura's
of the
face.
land of fire,
Not bad
declare to the
courage.
world that
Too
my
bad
lord
there's
is
no
the
reward.
lord of fire. Following
Almost as
Duque's
soon as
mockery,
Major Domo
the demigod
finished his
level
soul
flame
declaration,
blast, the entire
smashed
magic
out from the
world,
staff head
and
of
even the
Atish,
entire
directly
fire
exploded
elemental
at
world
zero
experienced
distance.
a magnitude 12 earthquake.
Sartura let out
Since
the most
ancient
tragic
times,
howl since
the
the
four
start of the
elemental
battle.
realms had
Her
always
seemingly
been in
pretty
the
face
face
was
of the
originally
four
covered by a
elemental
veil,
lords.
but
Their
under the
dominance
terrifying
over the
power
four
of the
elements could
flame
be
blast,
traced back to the
all of
War
her
of the
true
Sovereigns
forms had to be revealed.
25,000 years ago.
That was the unique
Before
mouth
that,
part of
there
an
were no
insect creature.
written records of the
The two
world.
cockroach leg-like
Therefore,
antennae were
Duque's
instantly
declaration that he
blasted
was
in
the
half,
Lord of Fire
and half
was
of
no
its
longer
face
a slap
instantly
in the
caved
face,
in.
but a
Its
complete
twisted
declaration
neck
of
couldn't
war.
help but have a
As
large
the saying
area
went,
of scorch
cutting
marks
off
appear
one's
on
path
it.
to wealth
If it was
like
just a
killing one's
simple
parents.
flame blast,
By doing this,
it wouldn't be able
Duque
to take
had
her life.
undoubtedly abused
In the next
all
moment,
of Ragnaros'
only the people with the
ancestors.
most powerful
Although
eyesight
Lager
could
probably
see
had
that the
no
flames that
ancestors
should have
to say.
exploded in all
Anyway,
directions
Duque
gathered
didn't care.
again under the control
Facing
of
the
Duque's
extremely
astonishing
violent and
elemental
furious
control.
Ragnaros,
Two
Duque had
consecutive
already
attacks.
destroyed one of
It
his
wasn't as
most
simple
important
as
clones.
duplicating the attack
According
twice,
to the
but
original
rather
history,
gathering the
in the
scattered
future,
elements
in the
once
land
again
of fire
and
launching
launching
another
another
destructive
the
attack
mortal
in an
heroes
extremely
would
short
definitely
amount of
fight
time
with
on
Lager.
the opponent's
Offending
already
him
injured
once was
and
offending
starting to be
him.
damaged.
Offending him
Perhaps
n times
in the
was
eyes of
also
those with
offending
poor
him.
eyesight, since
Duque
he had offended
instantly killed
Ragnaros to
Sartura.
death. Duque
Only
wouldn't
those who
give
saw this
Ragnaros
scene
any
clearly would
face
feel
and
the shock
directly
of looking
announce
up
that
to
he
a
was the
great
Lord of
mountain.
Fire.
Bang!
If Duque's declaration to all the pharaoh in the world
the
that he was
flames
the Lord
spread
of
wantonly
arcane
in the
magic
sky.
was slightly
Sartura's
overbearing,
scorched
then it was
black half-body
undeniably
fell
domineering
heavily
now.
into the yellow sand
Almost
at the bottom of the
immediately,
dark cave.
Ragnaros,
This
who
is
had been
the third
forced
one.
to sleep due to
Prophet
being injured
Skirum,
again,
Vistus,
was forced to
and
wake up.
Sartura.
After confirming the
Then
soul
Magni,
transmission
who had
again,
just come out of the
Lager
portal
was
that Duque had opened for him,
muttered
Duke
to himself,
Marcus,
"You
it was only at this
despicable
moment
person
that the
who
alliance
colluded with a traitor
powerhouses
to
realized
destroy
that
my
as soon as
clones
Duque
and my
appeared,
holy land.
he had already killed
I won't
3
spare
of
you.
C.
Just you
generals.
wait. I swear I will burn you and this damn world to ashes." In the dark
At this
sky,
moment,
the two
almost
beasts,
every mage could feel the
and
terrifying
Princess
waves
Huron
of anger
were
coming
fighting
from the
fiercely.
fire elemental
The
realm.
shock waves from the
However,
clash of
the
fire
reaction
and
of the
nature
pharaoh
elements
was,
continuously tortured the
the
already
well
unstable
done.
cave walls.
His Excellency
the
Duke
murals on the
Marcus
walls
is mighty
melted in
and
the flames,
domineering,
and the acid that
almost
Princess
every mage
Huron
cheered
spat
and
out
jumped for
splattered
joy.
everywhere. It was simple.
More rocks collapsed
Compared
and
to
fell.
the ownerless
The
arcane
alliance
elements,
heroes
who were
the more
fighting with the
primitive
family
fire
of
element
three
basically
had to
had a
constantly pay
master,
attention
and
to
its
the top
master
of their
was
heads
the
to
elemental
avoid being
demigod
affected by this
Ragnaros.
waterfall of
Of
rocks.
course,
This
the
guy
two
wasn't a
larger
good
bugs
person.
in the family of
He had
3
always
easily occupied the fire element and forbade anything other than fire elemental beings causing the Alliance heroes to be in a sorry state. Against the Titans, the Rangers with light movements could still make do, but the others had to worry about whether they would fall into those injured and imprisoned in the elemental plane, earthquake-like area. Losing his absolute control didn't have the time to care about all of this. This was he didn't even have the time to look at opportunity to use the fire gotten from killing Sartura. That was because in the darkness to avoid Logger's Lord, two humanoid creatures that were 7 to 8 stories tall were charging more magic power. Duque put Kalia down and said to Jaina, times in the past, I'll leave this to you. Playing with fire spells really consumes a lot of magic to gather his superior forces to deal with the enemy. Ragnaros for control over the fire element. He could leisurely take care of no matter what the result leaders of the enemy. At least he could vent his anger. Moreover,
with a leisurely
Duque was now
attitude.
making a big
Unfortunately,
deal out of it.
He couldn't.
With a wave of
in
his
the battle
hand,
between
he
the two
announced that
princesses
as long as
in
he
the sky,
succeeded in becoming a
Onyxia clearly
demigod,
had the
magic
absolute
power
upper hand.
consumption of
If
all
he wanted
fire
her to
spells
decide
would
the
be
winner
reduced by
immediately,
20%.
it would be difficult
This
for
time,
her own mount.
every mage
Rushing
was so
to decide the
excited that
winner
they
meant
cried out
taking
in
risks.
joy.
But
Attacking
I
recklessly
can't.
was never
Lord Duke
Onyxia's
Marcus,
forte. Please
the Black
succeed
Dragon
in becoming a
Princess was
demigod.
better at using
Please
careful
become
and
the god of
continuous
mages
attacks
to force the
all
opponent
of the
into a
Daligen,
desperate
and even
situation,
all of the
and then
Pharaoh's
killing them without
compatriots in the
suffering
magic
any
world
injuries.
were in an uproar.
Only when the
With the
situation was
ecstasy
urgent
of the
and there was
fire
no other
element
choice
and the
would
elemental
Duque
emissary
strictly
of
order
the
her
ice
to
element.
attack
The
fiercely.
ice dragon
So
Saffron
at this
appeared.
moment,
The
Duque
prayer
gave
gave her a
changed.
reassuring
I am
message.
Saffron.
Onyxia,
In the name of my
just
lord,
fight at
Duke
your own
Marcus,
pace. I declare
Thank
that my
you,
lord
master.
is the incarnation
Duque
of
was a
frost,
demigod,
the
and one
transcender
whose
of
strength
absolute
far
zero,
exceeded hers.
the blizzard
A
that
demigod
freezes
who had
all
the chance
evil.
to reach the
This
highest
time,
position.
it sounded very
Compared
famous.
to being forced to serve
Anyone
a
with a
lowly
discerning
human
eye would
before,
know
the
that
current
Duque's
Duke made
demand for the
Onyxia
frost
feel
domain
better
was
about her
relatively
reputation.
low.
Being
It was
the
just
mount
enough
of a
for him to
powerful
use.
demigod sounded
Others were
better
puzzled
than
by
being the
this.
mount of a human.
Why was Duque
If not
so
for the fact that they
domineering
were in
towards
a
other
fierce
domains,
battle,
but
Onyxia
so
would have run
uninterested
over
in the
and
frost
taken the
domain?
initiative to ask
Jaina
to
was
tame
the
a dragon.
only one who burst
In a
into
higher
tears.
cave, half of the
Sparkling
hero team
tears
led by
streamed
Varian
down her
was fighting
exquisite
with the
face.
tenacious Vancaris.
She knew that it wasn't
Obviously,
that Duque didn't
the
have the
outcome
courage
would
to
not
do
be
it,
decided
but that the
in a
god
short
of ice
period of
element
time.
was left for
It
her to
seemed that
break
Oro's
through.
early death and the fall of Naxxramas had deeply stimulated
Chapter 1304.
Duque announced that his divine realm involved
Other than
three
Oro and
elements.
Sea Thun,
In the
who was
eyes of
guarding
outsiders,
the underground palace,
Duque definitely
all the
wanted
leaders
to
of
become the god of
who could
mages.
fight were here.
It was natural
The two
for the
enemies who had come
strongest
at this moment
archmage
were
to want to
naturally
break through
the
the
twin
limits
emperors,
and become the god of
Vecnus
mages.
the Great and
no one
Vec,
was surprised.
Lord the Great.
Just like
Facing
when
the
Medivh
twin
borrowed
emperors
the
in the
magic
temple
of the
of
Tirisfal
An
Courage
to break
whose
through
strength
to the
was
demigod
second
realm,
only to see
he chose the
sun.
space magic
Only
that he was
Duque
best
could
at.
come personally.
That was why
Tyrant
Medivh was an
suddenly thought of
interstellar
something
wanderer
and exclaimed,
Before
"Wait,
this, only
Duque,
mages were affected.
isn't one of the twin
Because
emperors
it was a time
immune
of
to
war.
magic?"
Many pharaoh
Duque
had
laughed.
priests around him.
If someone else
Regarding
had
this
asked him,
grand
he would have
occasion,
definitely
the priests
replied,
held an
"Who do you
indifferent
think I am?"
attitude and came to
As
watch
Duque's
the show.
lover,
At
tyrants
most,
naturally
they
did not
carefully
need to
savored the
refute.
special
There was
elemental
only a
aura
confident
around the
smile.
mages. In his
Soon
left
they
hand
found
was
something
something simple
strange.
and
The
unadorned
air was
divine
filled with the
artifact
familiar
magic
holiness
staff
of the priests
Atish
and holy
legendary
knights.
staff of
It
the
was as
Guardian.
if they were in the
his
holy
right
church
hand
of
was the
Stratholme,
sharp divine
or the
artifact
Light's Hope
Chapel
longsword,
in the Eastern
Marcus,
Plaguelands, song
the
of
holy
light and
statues
darkness
of the sages
with a
stood
peculiar
in the middle of
spiral
it,
conical
gazing
shape.
at everyone
Clang.
with eyes that
At
seemed
this
to
moment,
transcend
the
time
sound
and
of the
space.
sword resounded through the 9
Don't
heavens.
tell me Lord Duke
The
Marcus
spiral
wants to
sword
dabble in the
Duque's
holy
hand
light too?
suddenly became dazzling.
They guessed right. The
The
entire
next
holy
person who
sword
appeared
seemed to have
shoved all
turned
the
into the
priests and made
purest
them
light,
lose the ability
becoming
to
the
speak.
brightest light in
This
the world.
was because in their
This
spiritual
sword
vision,
illuminated
they
the
saw the
entire
former
hell-like
archbishop
underground
of holy
cave
light
of the temple of
Alonso's
An
Fail.
Karaj.
Holy
At this
light
moment,
above,
not only
Lord
did Duque's
Duque's has
whole
been
body burst
resurrected,
out with the power
but
of a demigod,
look at his body,
but also
it's
a surging
translucent.
sword intent.
Is that a holy
Duque
spirit?
did not say a word.
It should be.
His attitude
In
said
the elemental
everything.
domain,
Today,
most priests
not just
were
a
amusing
demigod,
idiots with
I will
little
even
knowledge.
kill a god
They
for
would
you to
never
see.
guess that Alonso's was now a light elemental creature. Alonso's Fail, accept the
Chapter
request of my friend
1317.
Duke Marcus
The
to be his
twin
envoy
emperors.
of holy light.
They had an
In the name
incomparably
of my
deep
friend,
impression in
I swear
Duque's
that my
memory.
friend is the
After
preacher
all,
of holy
the twin
light,
emperors
the guardian
pioneered
of
the
truth and
warlocks
justice.
as tank bosses.
My friend
There
will
was no
spread
other
the
way,
3 great
because
virtues
under
and
Sea
dispel
Thun's
all
divine
evil in the
blessing,
world.
emperor
From the perspective of the
commonly
origin
known
of the
as the
world,
demon emperor,
this announcement was
completely
not the
immune
most
to
powerful
physical
one.
attacks.
But from the
He could only
perspective
be
of the
injured
mortal
by
world,
magical
this
elements.
announcement caused
On
the
the
most
other
shock.
side,
In the church square of Stormwind
giant
City,
sword
the commoners
and
who
was
gathered
commonly
to
known as
pray
the Sword
every day
Emperor
saw the
was
entire
completely
church of
immune to
holy
magic.
light emitting
The
dazzling
divine
golden
power
light
wrapped
that
around
pierced
his
the
body
clouds.
would
In the
instinctively
distance,
expel all
people seemed to
magical
hear
elements.
countless little
So the
angels
traditional
singing
way of
happily.
fighting was to have a
In the
tank with the
church,
highest
every
armor
monk
in the
priest
team
carried
and
the sword
holy
emperor,
knights saw it
and
with their
another
own
warlock
eyes.
carried the demon
The
emperor.
statue of the sage was
Unfortunately,
actually trembling the powerhouses in the Alliance hero group were in the middle of a fierce battle set off by the wind blowing on the surface of the water. Carry the monsters one after another. Duke really wanted to take action again before the twin emperors arrived and free up some people. Marcus, but unfortunately, your name will become sacred. 4 gazes full of powerful divinity crossed space and darkness and locked onto Duque. He did not know what went wrong, or if the history of Azeroth had taken a further serious turn. Dark, which the twin emperors the warlocks were to be burned to a crisp. As long as Duque dared to run and kill the other leaders just now, the twin emperors dared to teach Duque a deep and unforgettable charm had already seeped into every corner of her soul. The noobs, then the twin emperors could too. Seemed so they had known each other for so long. Even her declarations seemed to be an invitation. Who Duque had the least interaction with, were regarded as partners by Duque. My lord. and I hereby announce to the world that my lord is the blade of darkness. So Duque's choice was to go straight darkness, but this moment, things of light. Duque's sword intent was high, it was Thaddeus' sword intent was above all living beings. However, suppressing the initial shock race, his existence in this dark to be dispensable. Duque was the strongest existence that the twin emperors could not avoid. The power of wind and lightning. The twin emperors stopped Thaddeus' announcement. The sword emperor planted his giant sword on the ground. While the demon emperor put his hands on his hips. In the power of wind. They were waiting for Duque to go over. Then what are we, the true envoys of nature? That chaotic place should not be a demigod stage. What was interesting was that Sal had heard it too. Come here, a great battle needs a great stage. The tribal chief had a constipated expression on his face. Echoed each other, giving people the feeling of the two-man elemental emissaries. However, was indeed for a pair of brothers who had gone through thick knew very well that this was just even sharing their life force. It could even be a conversation couldn't for a mortal to step into the god realm. The cloak on Duque's back fluttered in the wind as the elemental storms surged from Duque's body. Extraordinary beings in the world had their eyes on the outside of Karazhan. At this moment, even though Karazhan feel that they were bathed in Duque's gazes from directly peeping inside. Duque it was as if the spiral sword had replaced the sun hanging high in the sky, curious, becoming the only source of light in this underground palace. And there were also those who were ready to watch a joke. In the next second, although Duque used arcane elemental energy formed Isis's foundation, and the other three supplements, it seemed clear at first glance that he had a wide range of powers and a promising future. Arcane energy extraordinary knew that the difficulty for Duque's body to step into the god realm was already dozens of times higher than that of ordinary weak demigods. To the left was Sword Emperor that Duque was going to fight. On the right front was the demon of fire demons. They spoke. In the end, we are called the twin difficulty caused by the difficulty of invisibility was immeasurable. I am what the outside world thought the demon emperor was the outside world's business. I am Vecnalus. Even though outside the magic array, bear the same his fate. 6 elemental from the day we were born, constantly chanting prayers, worked together, was completely unaware of it. Together. He calmed down. The true battle of the pinnacle will be sung at the same time. He slowly opened human the demigod powerhouse with the help of the system. He adjusted every cell in his body, striving to make the compatibility between his body and soul infinitely close to 100%. This is also the hidden in his blood began to flow with the pulse of his tongue twister didn't make every corner of his body. Instead, it made Duque see an opportunity. With the arcane circuit as the core, tone, ice and fire if as supplement 2 against 2 and we shadow win, will there be additional prizes? It began to carry out an orderly yellow eyes widened, spreading the benefits. The winner gets everything. The demon beating of the heart and the pulsation of the magic circuit the loser loses everything. The sound became louder and louder, like the beating of a drum. The loser's etiquette should be done to the levels of Karazhan. If you and your comrades win, Duque's appearance had completely changed. If I and my brother win, we will also get a real reward from Master. He no longer looked like a human with a physical wager very interesting. The energy of the 6 major elements appeared on the surface of Duque's body, fight against the twin emperors curved lines. Because the twin emperors would heal each other when they were close to each other. Duque's partner had to be covering the 60 yards away to face one of the emperors alone. In the surrounding void, this meant that Duque couldn't choose a warrior to tank the monsters. And after being filtered by the magic array, even if Magni had the descent of God, he couldn't last that shooting long. Towards the surface of Duque's body very difficult penetrating in his whole body. For example, when Master Howl killed the demigod skin, it was ultimately because Cenarius became more and more intense as the source of his power, and then became even more dazzling. The entire whole valley and have become a complete elemental body infiltrated and that was only on the surface. And in fact, the transformation was not yet complete. And that was how Master Howl carefully controlled the balance of elemental energy in his body. The twin emperors relied on even with the help of the system. This was still a task that required the number of insectoids dancing on the edge of a blade could not describe the difficulty of this task. Was destined to be a tug of war. Magni definitely couldn't last that long. Chapter 13:05. Duque cleared his throat. If he had to use a word to describe it, just as he was about to say that he didn't have a partner at 300 kilometers per hour that Duque was very familiar with of gravel could jump out at any time, with one hand on the steering wheel and the other out of the window, and then in an instant partner complete the standard Duque in this battle to fight against you. This was not something that could be done after showing off and running away. If he was not careful, not only his would he explode in minutes, opening and closing like a fish that had been scooped out of the water, twilight sucking in air fiercely. Duque clenched his teeth, And then,
from the day
like
Duque
embroidery
met her,
on a
she
grain
didn't
of rice,
feel that she
he
was
carefully
inferior
controlled
to
the
anyone.
system elf
It was
to
further
find during the
purified
second battle at the
pure
dark
elements
portal.
that had been
What she
absorbed
couldn't
into his
stand
body.
the most was during
With
the
arcane
third battle,
spells as
when
the
her
foundation
hometown was destroyed,
flames and
but she
frost
couldn't
as the
do
branches,
anything about it.
and holy
Time
shadow
flew,
and
and the
thunder
man who
as
had
the
conquered
support,
her body
he
and mind
separated
had
the
already
impurities
become
from
a
his
demigod
body
who
who
looked
looked
down
while
on
further
all living
fusing the
things.
magic.
As someone
He
by
carefully
his side,
compressed them
as a
wrapped
proud
them with
expert,
his consciousness,
as a queen
and
who was
directed them
determined
to where
take
they
revenge,
needed to go
she
under
couldn't
his
allow
spiritual
herself
guidance.
to stay where she was.
At the same time,
So this
every
time,
drop of
she wanted
magic
to
was
challenge
branded
her
with
limits.
Duque's soul.
Duque's
It was a
hands were
very
trembling.
fast process.
Even he couldn't
Even though
guarantee
there were
that he had
tens
the
of
strength
thousands
to
of
look
pores
after
all
Queen
over
She.
his body that
He
were
really
filled
wanted
with
to
magic,
say something,
Duke,
but when the words
with the help
reached
of
his
the system
mouth,
elf,
he couldn't
seemed
say
to
a
have
single
divided
word.
his soul into
Instead,
tens of
it was
thousands
Queen
of
She
parts,
who spoke
and
first.
each part was doing
What?
its own
I'm
job.
not the weak Kalia,
Filtration,
and I'm not one of those
purification,
seductive
sublimation.
sluts who swayed their
His
lewd
soul was
bodies
in
to
great
tempt
pain.
you.
From the day
pain
I
that
was born,
exceeded the
I was
limits of the
destined
physical
not to
body
be the
was
kind
not
of weakling
something
that
who
could
was
be
willing to be
suppressed by
protected
any
by
type of
others,
anesthetic,
and who needed to
because
be carefully
in a sense,
cared for.
Duque was
Remember,
giving up his
my
human
name
body
is
and was
Savannah's
transitioning
Windrunner.
into a
Her
spiritual body that
sonorous
was
and
close to an
forceful
elemental
words
body.
shook Duque's soul.
Very painful.
He really wanted to
Very
argue,
painful.
really wanted to
Heart-wrenching
forcefully hold her
pain.
down,
So
and not let
painful
her
that
do
his skin
anything
was
stupid.
cracking inch by
Suddenly,
inch.
Duque
The feeling
smiled.
of being torn into millions of pieces and then ground into powder almost made Duque collapse. But when the pain reached its peak, all of a sudden, it disappeared without a trace.
Sylvanus Windrunner
What
I know.
replaced it was a sublimation.
Even at the end of his life,
his whole
even
soul
at the
was
other
light,
side of the dead,
and under his feet,
Sylvanus
there seemed to be
never
a
gave
colorful,
up
blurry
fighting
world
against
that
fate.
was opening a
In
door
Duque's
that belonged
harem,
only
there
to
was
him.
obviously
Duque.
a hierarchy
Come,
of power.
Welcome,
Unlike
our new
Queen
companion.
Sylvanus,
A
Jaina,
misty
and
neutral
Tyrant,
voice said
who
in
stood
the
at the
common
top
language.
of the mortal realm,
The six
elements
elements
stood
in a
were lagging
six-pointed star
behind,
position,
especially
floating behind
Kalia,
Duque.
as a greenhouse
His
flower
soul
trapped in the
slowly
Forbidden
descended,
Palace in her
and the
early
next
years.
moment, it was
Duque
really
felt
difficult
as if
for
a
her to
certain
participate in the
unimportant
cruel
memory of
boss
his was
battles.
being asked if he
Duque
could read
knew
it.
very well
Duque
that Kalia did not
subconsciously
want to be
agreed.
ostracized
Then,
in the harem
a
and become a
majestic
mere
palace
flower
appeared
vase
in
or
front of
mascot.
him.
It was a
Gothic
for similar
palace,
reasons that
somewhat
Alicia
similar
chose
to
to be the
Notre
queen
Dame
de Paris,
and to accompany him in battle.
epic-making landmark
Queen
in the history
Sylvanus,
of
on the other
European
hand,
architecture
wanted to
on
become
Earth.
stronger.
The first
hoping
thing that
she
came
could
into
shoulder
view
the
was the
hopes of her
towering
fellow
spire
elves,
that pierced
hoping to
through the
take
clouds.
revenge on the scourge
The
that
facade had a
destroyed her
unique
homeland.
style, and the structure was
Stubbornness,
rigorous.
resistance,
It looked
and
very
desire
majestic
were the
and
greatest
solemn.
motivations for her to become stronger.
It is divided
This was also
longitudinally
why
by
she chose to
pilasters
stand
into
beside
three
Duque
blocks,
at this moment,
and horizontally
to fight
by
against
three
an
bands
enemy
of
that she could not
ornamentation,
defeat.
of which, at
To
the
be
bottom,
honest,
there are
Queen
three
Sylvanus
recessed
was
doorways.
very uneasy
Above
now.
the doorway was the
Her being here
so-called
could be said
demigod
to be
corridor.
courageous,
On it
but
were
also
statues
reckless.
representing the forest
As a
god
mortal god,
Cenarius, getting
the
involved
white
in a
deer
battle
god
between
Malorn,
demigods,
and many others.
One mistake would
Higher
lead
up
to
was the
eternal
corridor
damnation.
of the true god.
But she was not
There were
resigned
clearly
to it.
6 statues,
Courage was like
but the
a
only
spine.
ones that Duque
In
could
the face of
distinguish were
danger,
the moon
if you
goddess
yielded
Elune
once,
and sea,
it was easy
Thun.
to do it a
The
second
rest were all
time,
blurry.
a third
The
time,
huge and
you would never
luxurious
be able
door
to stand
opened
with
with
a
a straight
loud
again.
bang. Who
Duque
knew when the
strode in.
spine of courage
The
would
scene
break?
in front of him made
Sailing
Duque
against
a
the
little
current,
stunned.
one who did
The
not
inside
advance
was
would
more
be
like
pushed
a
back.
semicircular
She
theater,
could not let it
and
go,
the position
and
at
had
the
no
front was
reason to let
obviously
it go
for the true god.
In her heart,
As a newly
Queen
ascended
Sylvanus was
demigod,
prepared to
Duque
be reprimanded
could
by
only be
Duque
at the outermost
or even
circle.
chased away
Duque
by
didn't
force.
mind.
She even
Following
thought
the
of
guidance
dozens
of
of
his
reasons
soul,
to
he
argue
found
with
an
Duque.
empty position.
But there was no
He wasn't
anger,
surprised
no
that
lesson.
such a large temple
All
was
she got was
empty,
a look that
because
said,
he saw a
"I
huge
understand you."
illusory existence
Infinite
next to his
gentleness
position.
and infinite
It was an
trust.
existence that
Not a
seemed
single
both
word.
real and
Instead,
fake,
he
as
just
if it was
leaned
pretending
over,
to sleep,
hugged her waist
but it
just
also
right,
seemed like it was
and kissed
really
her
sleeping.
gently.
It
Even
wasn't
in
the
this
first
life,
time they had
Duque
kissed,
didn't
and it
directly
wasn't
come
even
into
the first
contact
time
with
they
it,
had deep
but he could
contact.
still recognize it
However,
from its green
this
appearance.
kiss made her
It was
feel
the
like a little
demigod
girl who didn't
Cenarius,
understand
who
the
should have
ways
been
of the
killed
world.
by Grandpa
It was
Roar.
as if she was in a
Duque
dream.
frowned slightly.
It was warm and
He
full
walked
of
around
moisture.
the huge Cenarius,
After their lips
and when he
parted
came
and
to
they
his
stood up
position,
straight again,
an elemental
monumental throne with Savannah's were no longer naturally and lifted Duquesne's body onto the throne. At the same
twin
time,
emperors glistening
Duque
yellow
saw his name
eyes
in a
stared
daze.
at Queen Sylvanas
It was like
for
a
a
pen
long
sticker
time,
used by
feeling
primary
deep
school
veneration.
students. It was an empty name with only a hook
mortals.
and no meaning.
He also
It
has
floated
extraordinary
not far
courage.
from Duque's chest.
We are the twin
Duque
emperors.
pointed his finger.
I
and the
recognize
six
you as my
elements
opponent.
automatically condensed
Queen
on his
Sylvie
finger
held the bow in
according
her
to the
left
proportion.
hand and flung
Duque
her cloak
used
with her
his
right
finger
hand,
as a pen
revealing
and wrote
an
his name in a
gold
flamboyant
coin.
manner. The illusory frame absorbed Duque's
She
name
flicked
like
it into the
soil
air with her
absorbing
thumb
rainwater.
and said loudly,
In his spiritual
"When the coin
vision,
lands,
Duque could feel the magic power in his body disappearing
when
at
we
the
start
speed of a
fighting
river.
each other."
At the same
Duque's
time,
face
with the magic
stiffened.
power stirring,
It
the
seemed
twin
to have become
emperors
a chaotic
come,
mass with
the golden
six
colors
colors
in
kept
his
spinning
spiritual
in the
sea.
air.
It was seemed very to have lost the restraints of time. Gradually, and kept spinning, slowly, Duque could tell that it was the divinity light he had absorbed into his body. But the four hearts were getting more and more nervous. High purity magic
After
power,
what seemed like
the
a
6
century,
types of divinity merged into
fell
one
to the ground,
and bloomed
making
with the
a
light
crisp
of life.
clang.
The chaos
sound.
was constantly
The twin
washed
emperor's
away,
bodies,
and the
which were at least
divinity in
7
his
stories
perception
tall,
became
were
clearer.
like mountains
The mark
toppling
of the
over,
previous owner
pressing
in
down
the
on
divinity
Duque
separated
and
at
Queen
this time
Sylvanas.
and attached a
At the
new
same
soul
time,
name. Queen
blue
Sylvanas
arcane
and
magic,
Duque moved
red
at the same
flames,
time and
white
shot out
frost,
like an arrow.
golden holiness,
Queen Sylvanas strode with
shadows,
lightning speed,
purple thunder,
and in the midst of her
the
mad
6
dash,
colors blended
she had already
and quickly
shot
formed
3
a rainbow.
arrows at the magic immune
Following
sword
the
movements
Emperor
of Duque's hands.
the Great.
It was shaped
The sharp
and
arrows
fixed
drew
into
a
a straight
straight
line in the air. This was
bringing
Duque
with them
engraving his
of
name
lightning
in the
as they
core of the
pierced
world.
straight at Vecnolus.
Vecnolus
It was
did
also
not even
Duque
frown.
shaping his
The
demigod sword,
broadsword, which
a
was as
super
wide
strong
as the
soul
main
that was
beam of a
far
building,
superior to
came
ordinary
crashing
souls.
down, and the light
Duque's
of the
magic
sword
power
drew a
and
strange
soul
arc in
power
the void.
continued to be consumed
Whether it was
at
a
a high
person
speed
or an
at this
arrow,
time.
it was
If it was
impossible
an
to
ordinary
resist
demigod
the
who
edge
did
of the
not have
holy
enough
Kiraj
accumulation,
sword. They might
the
run
3
out of
sharp
power
arrows
and then
were
be
about to be
destroyed on the
destroyed
way to
after a
becoming a
flash
demigod.
of the sword light.
But Duque
But the
was
great
not
emperor
an
did not
ordinary
expect
demigod.
that Queen
Since
Sylvanas
he had
would
chosen
use
her
her more
left
complex
hand, which was
divinity
holding the
structure,
bow,
he
to
also
draw
had a
3
wider
extremely
source of
thin
divine
lines
power.
of lightning from
He
her
could even
fingers,
clearly
and
feel that on
actually
the
pull
2
the 3
continents of the
arrows
Eastern
away from their
Kingdom and
predetermined
Kalimdor.
trajectories.
Countless mages,
After the arrows
priests,
changed direction
druids,
in the air,
and shamans
they
were
once
supporting
again
him
stabbed
faintly,
at Vecnolus,
using their
the emperor
overflowing
of the
magic
Kiraj
to
Empire.
quietly replenish
Vecnolus
Duque's
was
consumption.
finally a little
Similarly,
surprised. In the
he did not
fire
expect
elemental
that the
world
arrows
and the
that were
water
shot would
elemental
have a
world,
second attack.
there was also
especially
a good
when
amount
the
of
arrows
magic
should have been cut
replenishment.
down.
Of
But he
course,
still did
as
not
the core
care.
arcane magic,
He was immune
Duque
to magic,
could only rely
and the most
on
powerful
Karazhan's
lightning
reserves.
power on the
That was
arrows
the
was
overflowing
ineffective
energy
against
from
him.
the void and
Although
other
the
spaces
arrows
that
would hit
Karazhan
him,
had
they might
accumulated
not
for
be able to
countless
hit his
years.
vitals.
Suddenly,
If they hit his
Duque
armor,
saw a
it
vague
wouldn't
figure.
matter. Although
Secondly,
it was vague,
the arrows
he
were
still
too small
recognized
and
who
lacked
it was
attack
at a
power.
glance.
At this moment,
Medivh,
Queen Sylvanas, in the midst of a high-speed dash, opened her left
Chapter
hand angrily again.
1306.
The
That's
3
right.
arrows,
It
which
was
had already
Medivh.
slowed down,
Medivh,
suddenly
who was
sped up
supposed to live
twice
a
in an
happy retirement
unscientific
after
way.
the third battle
2
of the
arrows
Dark
were
Portal,
shot at his
made a
eyes,
move at
and
this
one
time.
was shot at his throat.
It was a powerful force
Vecnolus
hidden
had no
at the
choice
bottom
but
of
to stop
Karazhan
and
that
use
even
his left
Duque
hand,
did not
which was
perceive.
wearing armor,
Duque
to
was a
protect
little
his
taken
vital
aback.
parts with a backhand
If old
slap,
Max
and
wanted
at
to
the
trick
same
him,
time,
he could
hit
blow
the
up
3
his lair
arrows
in
away,
minutes, and he wouldn't have a
Queen
place to cry.
Sylvanas had already taken
Fortunately,
this opportunity
Duque
to shoot
was the
3 rounds
inheritor
of
who
arrows,
truly
a total
inherited
of
Medivh's
9 arrows.
aspirations and
She
legacy.
manipulated the
Well
currents
done.
of the lightning,
But don't
and
waste your
easily
power.
let the arrows
The
that
higher
flew
your
out
starting
get a
point
better
for
angle
becoming
of
a
entry.
demigod, the greater your chance of becoming a true god. For a moment,
Across the void,
arrows all
Medivh's
drew
voice
beautiful
reached the
arcs in
depths
the air
of Duque's
and
soul.
hit the target that
Yes.
she wanted to shoot.
Duque
Armpits,
nodded heavily.
elbows,
In this
knees,
world,
there were
ankles.
many
Although these were
extraordinary
protected
people.
by armor,
For example,
they were still
before
vulnerable parts with
transmigrating,
gaps,
there were
and
people
were the
who could
targets that
complete
Queen
1
Sylvanas
micron level
wanted to hit.
polishing.
There
Years
were
of
people who
fighting
could
against
complete
giant
electric
electric
welding
welding
that
had
even
made
her
her
give
give
up
up
the
the
fantasy
fantasy
of
others
killing
could
with
not.
one shot.
That was both
Instead,
the craftsmanship
she
of
used
the
a more
great
practical
nation's
method,
craftsmen
which
and
was
the
to
display
paralyze
of the
the
limits
opponent
as
as
much
much
as
as
possible,
possible,
or
with
to
the help
weaken
of the
the
system
opponent's
elf,
movement.
Duque's
When
fine
all
control
9
of
arrows
magic
hit,
made it
and she
so
felt
that
not a
not a
trace
trace
of
of
movement
magic was
speed
wasted.
had obviously
The
slowed
magic
down.
passed through
Queen
the soul
Sylvanas
shell,
could not help
converged,
but let out a
condensed,
long sigh
and then
of relief.
refined.
This
One
kind of
could see
magical
the
second
divinity
or
condensing
even
at
third
high
stage
speed,
control,
forming
Queen
the form
Sylvanas
Duque wanted.
only had a success
Before
rate
this,
of more than
Duque,
50%
who had
in
read
practice.
countless ancient
All
books
9
and
arrows
visited
hit the
Aegwin,
target,
learned
it was
that
almost
every
a
demigod
stroke of
had to
genius,
condense their
and
own
even she did
divinity
not
symbol.
think that she could
This
actually
symbol was
succeed.
both the symbol
But if
of
she
a
had to use
demigod
a word
and
to
the source
describe
of
her
his
mood
core
at
power.
this moment, the
It was
animal-type
simply
demigod was
cool.
very simple.
The battle,
its
was
symbol
just
was
the beginning.
himself. And
The
at
next
most
moment,
it could
the
strengthen
huge
a certain
Emperor
part.
Keela's sword had
For
already
example,
slashed
the god
down.
of boars
Queen
strengthened his pair
Sylvanas
of
made a
fangs.
flexible
But
twisting
Duque
movement
was
while
working
towards the position of the god of mages, and narrowly dodged the sword. And it would be a bit of a waste to have a human form that looked exactly like himself. To the left, the divinity symbol could be used to do more things, one of which hit the emperor's neck, thinking hard, but it was obvious that it was a muscle. Duque made his decision. At this moment, which was so thick that at least two people would need to wrap their arms around it. The bowl-sized wound on the neck muscle was not considered serious. Parallel lines, and then branches intersected with each other, forming nodes, turning into a huge web. Chapter 1319. Duque looked like a spider weaving a web. Brute force to change the direction of the giant sword, because if someone were to observe carefully, they would discover that there was something like a exaggerated backward at each node, her body above her magical fluctuations, parallel to the ground. What Duque did was to cover the entire planet Azeroth. She then made 3 backflips in a row before stopping the powerful momentum. It was actually quite strenuous. During the backflips, therefore, she shot 9 more arrows. Avoided the important and focused on the trivial. Duque was fiercely attacking the demon emperor
network and the most powerful image transmission of the magic every alliance or horde saw that Queen Sylvanas in the Eastern Kingdom had the carvings at the front of her breastplate cut off by the Sword Emperor's great sword. What Duque was going to do was to build a magic internet. Did she really think that there would be one super large router that would spread his network wirelessly like a Wi-Fi signal? Became an undead like in history. Duque brainless operation. It couldn't be helped that Queen Sylvanas danced on the edge of the sword. The price he paid was just the free magic power that Pharaoh gave him when he wasn't using magic. Then Duque would have to use the mirror reality to pull the Sword Emperor. Please enter your Wi-Fi password. That was also a very dangerous choice. Spell. Since she was here, magic stick, Duque had to believe in her. Duque, great magic stick. Queen Sylvanas was definitely delicate and weak compared to the seven-story sword Emperor Vethor. There had never been someone with such a conscience. Hit by a sword. In fact, on the other hand, was very as long as she was focused enough and this was like a bank helping customers save money and giving them a current interest of 1%, would never be able to kill the twin emperors. Sorry, note that the lives of the twin emperors were shared. This was not Duque being arrows couldn't hurt them. His honest and reliable little husband had once again that there wouldn't be a second existence of magic power that could attract the attention of the demon magic power that he saved daily. Duque went all out. What if he needed to overdraw? The thin lines of the elemental laws interest was higher, and it was daily interest. The two demigods, the consequences with their deepest understanding of elemental magic, were very serious. A gorgeous in a society governed by law. It was a battle the most they could do was to blacklist you and forbid you from spending too much. The entire sky was inverted. Countless arcane even if he died, poured down he would like have to pay the shower. Drawing really dazzling even his soul would have to bombard the demon emperor. Not only at this moment, but not a single pharaoh had realized how kind Duque's and scrupulous work was. Every time Duque spread the magic network across the area of the weave could be seen to increase. Stepped onto the ladder. Every time the area of the weave expanded, Duque's soul returned to his brand new body and slowly opened his eyes by 10%. The awakened Duque's black eyes shone with the light of new life. He raised his imperial in the name of Duke Marcus, and a huge screen of light as black as a magic behind him, enveloping the entire hall. But it reverberated floated on the screen like magic world, like emitting thunder. An evil the and ones who heard it the most were naturally the mages. He extended his withered left claw and finally pointed at Duque. Shamans, countless black spiritual energy beams shot the toward Duque's arcane water elemental world. The demon king, along with the arcane energy that reverberated in the starry sky who was proficient in many types of magic, injected magic power into the magic network that covered the two continents. Magic. The trembling of the elemental technique had turned into one of his specialties. At this moment. However, this low after the spellcasters entered the demigod realm, times, the way they as if it was tempting every spellcaster to try it. Just like how it was impossible to burn Ragnaros to death in the Dalajan shooting range, a morning star wizard shouted, arcane magic to kill a demigod whose core was arcane magic. Though he never took me even if it was a newly advanced demigod, he definitely wouldn't cheat me. The countless beetles on the ground began to approach and chanted intentionally or unintentionally. To be honest, those who hung out often knew each other's capabilities. Can't you be a little more astonished to see that in his previous life as a player, he obviously did not have the ability to deal with beetles that would constantly respawn originally, and never finish killing. It could only hit a magic target halfway, as a true demigod of Azeroth, flying. He had plenty of ways to deal with the Demon King. New things were often more difficult to implement. Only the size of a palm considered this rapidly point, which was why he had given such a huge discount. In the blink of an eye, while ideals were beautiful, the size of a carriage. Cruel. Bang. It was not that no one used it, nor was it that no one was willing to pay. Flames like it was just that too many people used it, and the mana in the magic network could not revealed a playful smile. Duque did not need to do anything. Hurriedly drawing in more mana from the two major elementals wrapped in raging flames. The water elemental realm was fire demon guards. The great water elemental Majordomo Executus thugs had died in the war of domination. Now that Majordomo Executus had become Duque's elemental emissary and was in charge of managing the weave, his underlings naturally became even though he had been in a state of deep sleep to recover, the fire demon guards were woken up by Duque, strong warriors with Duque, but here who had announced that he would raid his home and still had the audacity to ask for mana from his lair. Ragnaros immediately shouted in the fire elemental language. They were also covered in blazing flames, looking quite formidable that would lead children astray.
Duque did not have much hope in the combat power of these fire demon guards.
Aunt can't bear
Since
it.
the Demon King was harassing him with cannon fodder, he could not focus on dealing with them. Duque almost died on the spot.
Handed over to
As
Major
a demigod,
Domo
he did not have the ability to absorb
with the
mana
weave
from the fire
However,
elemental realm.
after the fire
Seeing
demon
that
guards
the fire
became
elemental
pure
mana
elemental
in the
creatures,
weave was about
they
to be
were
exhausted,
really powerful.
the unscrupulous
They could actually
merchant Duque
drive
made
all
up
the
his
bugs
mind
big
and
or
used
small
his ultimate
out of a
move.
radius of 30
The
meters
final
around
explanation
Duque.
belongs to the
Humph.
master of the weave,
Veclor looked
the
unhappy.
demigod Duke
Suddenly,
Marcus. Those big beetles were no longer simple self-destructing bugs. They became the size of rhinoceroses to celebrate the opening of the weave crystal light. The first
Dozens
10
of crystal
spellcasters
beetles
to be
rushed
bound to
up
the
and
weave will
fought
receive
evenly
with
with
the
the
fire
fire
demon
gift
guards. Regardless of their rank,
with a
they
thought
will
from
enjoy
Duque,
a 50%
a modified
discount
version
on
of
magic
the
power
fire
for 10
elemental
years,
jumped out
and
of the
3
illusory
additional
weave.
metamagic
On the
specializations for
surface,
each
this was
element.
a fire
The
elemental
first
bathed
100
in
to be
fire.
bound to the weave will
However,
receive a
there was a
golden gift
huge
pack.
change in body
The first
shape.
1,000 to be
It was
bound
the
to the weave
Balrog
will
from the Lord
receive
of the
a
Rings
silver
world,
gift pack,
where the white
anyone
sword
who is
Saint
bound to
Gandalf
the
was.
weave will receive
With
a
the
beginner's
appearance of a
gift pack,
demon,
which
the
can be
Balrog
stacked
was
with
good
the
at
previous
using
packs.
whips and beheading swords.
Spellcasters of the
Roar.
Alliance will enjoy an additional 95% discount on magic
This
power
Balrog,
consumption,
which did not
Those
exist
of
in the world of
nationality will enjoy an
stabbed the
additional
flaming sword in its
88%
right hand
discount
into the
on
ground
magic
as soon
power
as it
consumption.
appeared.
With this
In
action,
reality,
brilliant
after the
flames
first 1,000,
suddenly
the
rose
weave's
from the
mana
void,
would basically
followed
be
by
balanced,
magma
and
pouring out of the
Duque would
void
not
on the
need to
spot.
dig Peter to pay Paul.
Many golden
Not
rivers
to mention
hung
those at the
upside
back,
down in the void,
even those at the
lighting
front
up
would
the
not
entire
necessarily
twin
be able
emperor's
to take
hall.
advantage of Duque.
Spreading along the
It was just
golden
like
beam
how the
of light,
so-called local
even the ground
handicrafts
began to
in
turn
Duque's
into a
previous
state
world
of
were all
melting
from
magma.
Ewu.
Every
It would be
crystal beetle
foolish
that
to
was
buy them
touched
at a
immediately
50%
emitted
discount,
a zzzz
but he would still
sound,
make a profit
which
even
made
if he
one's
gave
hair
them a
stand on
10%
end when they
discount.
heard it.
On the
The
surface,
defenses of
Duque
these
seemed to
crystal
be selling
beetles
them
that were
at a
specialized
huge
by
discount.
Veclor were
There were so
extremely
many tricks
frightening.
that even
A
Duque's
single
little
pillar of
conscience
lava fire
felt
couldn't even
apologetic.
melt their outer
For
shells.
example,
But
an
as
ordinary
2,
sky
3,
wizard
and
would need
even more
50
pillars
units
of
of mana
lava
to
fire
cast a
condensed
beginner
into
fireball.
lava spears.
In
The
reality,
high temperature
to
and
achieve
sharpness
the same
combined
effect,
into
they
one
did not
body.
need that
The
much.
only outcome for
Magic
these sturdy
education
monsters
in
was
this
to
era
shriek
was
as
actually
they turned
very
into a
primitive.
pile of charcoal.
One pharaoh had
the
found a
golden
more
light of the
feasible
fire
path,
illuminated
and then
the
taught it
face
by
of
example.
Emperor Veclor.
A large
He
number of
finally
people knew how
realized
to
how
use it,
difficult it
and
was
it
to
became
deal
a
with the
classic.
newly promoted
Coupled with the
demigod
fact that
standing in
Pharaoh
front of
with a
him.
bit of a brain
In
chose
terms
the
of the
wrong
total
talent
amount
and
and
ran off
quality
to
of
do all
magic,
sorts of
Duque
research,
was not
very few
inferior to
Pharaoh
him.
cared about
A
the
veteran
efficiency of
demigod.
basic magic
In terms
and
of
whether it could be
multicasting
improved.
and the strength of his
If your
generals,
fireball
he was
can't kill
also
your
superior.
enemy, it's because
In
your
Duque's
fireball
weave,
isn't big
more
enough.
kinds of
It's
attack
not
magic
fierce enough.
began to emerge.
90%
Breaking
of
through
the
the
mentor
obstruction
said
of the
this.
shadow arrow
This
rain
was
and
because
hitting
the
the magic
fireball would
shield of the
dissipate
demon
very
emperor.
quickly once it left the mage's control. To throw it 30 yards away and still maintain its power when it hit someone, they would only focus on gathering the fire
Demon
elements
King
and
waved
ignore
the
the other
Karaj
problems.
Imperial staff
Duque
as his
was
mind
different.
worked rapidly.
In the past,
thinking
the
about the
Dalajan
situation
was under Antonita's
the situation
control,
was clear
so
now.
naturally,
His
he had
brother,
no room to
Vecnolus,
interfere.
had the absolute
After
advantage
Ronan became
against
the chairman
Servanas
of Kirin
and was
Tor,
constantly
Duque
pressuring
was
him.
so busy
On
that
the
he
other
had no
side,
time
in
to
the
care about
elemental
the
domain,
mages.
he was
Now that
severely
Duque
restricted
was going
by
to become
Duque,
the god of
who
mages,
specialized
even
in
if he was
3
only a
elements and had
demigod,
decent
he had
strength
the
in the
obligation
other
to
3.
seduce. If this
Oh,
continued,
no.
it was
To
only a
correct the
matter of
mistakes
time
of those
before
new
he was
mages.
defeated. The
First,
current situation
magic
was
model.
a bit like an
In the
Ouroboros.
past,
Those fellows
snake
had
head
used
at the
messy
back
wanted to
models,
devour
and
the snake
Duque
tail
looked down
at the
on them.
front.
And
If
they
whoever
wanted to
devoured
use
it
the
faster
weave,
would be the
they
winner.
had to use his
Was
model.
it Vecnolus who killed Servanas first? If someone had
Or
the
would
ability
Duque
to remove
exhaust
the
them by
halo of
attacking
divinity
him
from the
first?
weave and
In the
study
end,
it carefully,
he made a decision.
they would discover that
It was
the
a
fire
cruel
magic
order.
and ice magic
Hundreds
were
of
filled
insects
with
flew
fluid
at Dynamics
dynamics
at once.
applications. They had
All
all
magic
sorts
shot
of
out,
characteristics.
has experienced
Some
a
were
similar
filled with
flat
fire
nozzle
elements,
contraction
some were
process,
frost,
like a
and
water
some
gun.
were acid. Next
These
was
insects
predetermined
ignored the
firing
attacks of the
trajectory.
fire demon
In the
guards
past,
and Balrogs,
the spells would be
and
thrown
charged at
out in a
Duque,
straight line,
who was standing in
and
the
they
air
wouldn't care
on an
where they flew
arcane
halfway.
throne of energy.
It was a good thing if he could hit it, even though
but
the
if he
formation
couldn't,
had
he could
been
only
penetrated.
blame it on his
Not
bad
a single
luck.
fire demon
Accuracy
guard
was
left
not
the
a
front
consideration.
line.
They
It was
even
all
ignored the pursuit and continued to attack the beetles within their attack range. Teams of mages to be more powerful. A new elemental creation appeared. And randomly shooting, this time, no matter how reckless the enemy was, they would be blasted to pieces. In the name of Thaddeus, now I declare that no existence can surpass me and attack my master. Any flow of fire or ice magic was had the appearance of a holy knight change and transfer. His fingers. If a little large number was used in advance to disperse the line of defense or cold air jumped out of nowhere and the target. After a series of laws of thermodynamics, the entire world spontaneously transfer from a hot object to a cold object object, and directly let more beetles burrow out of from a low-temperature object to a high-temperature object, growing larger. This allowed fireballs and continuous arrows to follow the predetermined trajectory. It was hard to say if the scene was tragic or cruel. According to the knowledge that these creatures had learned in university and the theory of Azeroth magic were like with the final optimization by rushing wave after wave towards the impenetrable line of defense, magically modified version of the weave magic. Pitiful. While he was busy breaking through to the demigod level, the allied army was in the eyes of the twin emperors. With the support of tyrants true starfall, Vecnalas began to cast step by step to sweep. It was a spell completely different from attack magic. After using up the wreckage of the void battleships that could be smashed down from the atmosphere, the twin emperors would immediately destroy the three insect nests of the sword emperor, who was immune to magic, under the cover of the flying fortress. The demon emperor, the allied army began to slowly advance in the direction of the ancient city of snorted coldly in the war of the shifting size of a small. It was the dragons who smashed into air superiority for the night elves. The flames instantly burned their powerful demon emperor's left shoulder strength to reap not only the armor, but almost half of his left shoulder was burned to ashes. When most of the dragons were tied up in the void battlefield, it was the terrifying cannons of the flying fortress that cleaned up all the insect people as if he was announcing his victory. The exploding Duke's spirit 3 bombs easily cleared up large areas of the airspace. Master said that only existences that are allowed to teleport in his sacred land can exist. 1,000 years ago, the night elves under Fandrel's even if he didn't want to admit it, he had to. The reign of insect stepping into a true god's territory was like stepping into their domain. The ones opening the way were steam divine power with anti-sand throughout the entire the huge temple. Engines with shovels expanding the magic net for Duke was a very, very strenuous task. Because the largest insect nest had been completely destroyed, Duke had to do allied this, army or else he would be cut off effort to reach the wall in the outside world. The wall of beetles outside demigod, Duke's own divine power reserves and magic reserves were definitely the shifting sands 1,000 years ago, constructed the prototype of the magic net when he was forced to join the battle. Thanks to Duke letting Naxxramas fall and the support of the magic net and removing the other insect nests wouldn't be much different from an ordinary Breaking Dawn on the beetle platform in front of the wall of beetles. Tougher, but everyone knew that in time, Duke, when the ancient god of types of elements, even Thun couldn't expel all 6 of Duke's major elements. Once again rush out at an extremely high density. If it was 1 or 2 holes, it would be easy to patch. Any formation, if it was a wicker basket full of holes would be completely destroyed. What was there to patch? To clean up this situation, so no matter how they had to open the wall of beetles to suppress him, kill their way into expanded his magic net bit by bit, get rid of whether it was the total amount of magic or the volume of the magic net itself. Quicksand staff in her hand. Thun could completely mess up the spatial coordinates of the temple. Son died. At this moment, Duke couldn't feel any clear spatial coordinates and cut off his connection with the dragons. Emperor but this was about to switch united efforts of the allied army. The staff Duke was didn't even bother to show the slightest bit of nervousness on his face. The wall of beetles it was just that his left hand was still tightly gripping the divine artifact magic staff. After General Marcus which was somewhat famous even among the Kiraj insect people, the seal was already on the verge of collapse. Vic, no need to say more, we all understand. He had already thought about how he was going to torture that jumping female elf swung after the teleportation, looking eager to give it a try. Suddenly behind him, other than Duke, the inevitable situation and the rest, teleportation, stood all the powerhouses of the Alliance, the Nephilim including William, was stunned. A few days ago, hadn't been left the team behind led by William finally killed the evil completed a successful teleportation, and then the entire team teleported over to meet up with the main army. After Thun had mixed up almost all the spatial coordinates here, any teleportation or flash was an extremely high-risk gamble. The quicksand staff if he wasn't careful, he would get stuck and with the deafening sound of the gong, or even in some unknown wall of spatial rift suddenly opened the largest door. He couldn't help but exclaim, an endless swarm of beetles. He never dreamed that Duke would be Allied army's formation. What he really couldn't understand was how Duke had located the spatial stone embankment. Duke smiled, even if they were prepared, all the Allied army could do here was maintain the battle line. Any attempt to advance further was impossible. It was supposed to be like this elemental energy, the cannons, Queen Zealand flying towards Sword Emperor's new chief commander, who was 100 meters away. Bronzebeard, Duke, shouted, you bastard! The entire stronghold shown was a little exasperated. That was the light of the cannons. Had a better way for a normal warship to do this. It was already impressive to have a 3-story cannon hold. Regardless of that, broken the Sword Emperor's sword from bottom to top again. After modifications, had to focus on dodging and counterattacking again. The top and bottom 8 stories were all 155mm cannons and below. The middle six stories were all kinds of crazy things. In response to Duke's super large mortars, cannons that were originally which had already been completely extinguished, and even stronghold again ignited with a blazing cannons that were originally abandoned by the dwarves because they were too difficult to transport, spreading to his left elbow and the left side of his neck in an pulled out by Magni's orders. He had underestimated his enemy. It was not easy to get such a big treasure like manipulation of the elements, and as a moving stronghold with a main city-level portal that should be the means of the fire demon on Duque's orders, which forbade the master craftsman could be like a phoenix, installing laboratories and flames from ashes again, and burning the enemy's body all the crazy things in it, and once again turning it into an accelerant for the rolling flames. Had become such a ferocious expression finally changed, and he felt various calibers. The target was more than 5,000. There were already 36 wizard towers, 108 under construction. The final target was 256, but the gap was so huge. Among them, there were 36 wizard towers for radiant mages to oversee, his proficiency in using power breaking dawn mages. Although their domains were different, only 2,000 cannons, speaking, there were only 500 on each of the humans and elves. Its power was definitely at a level that could destroy the heaven and insect people. There should not be such a gap. Fire the cannons. Vithor could not help but look at the inexplicably inconspicuous wooden staff unlike his two elder brothers. An extremely rare space-type magic staff, it was not strong. For a new demigod talent was basically focused on long-range weapons. Secretly envious of him. After careful study, he even proposed the idea of transforming spoils into a multifaceted insect people were the model race of the strong, no matter which direction the enemy attacked the stronghold from, they would receive with a bit more three-dimensional counterattack. Now, under the bombardment of the cannons, all the shadow elements he had accumulated in one breath, sky and the dark shadow elements easily fell to the ground like heavy rain on his body, forming a thick mountain of bug corpses. Want to call your brother over? Lang frowned and gave the second order. All mortars will drop incendiary bombs. A few minutes later, the entire wall of beetles had turned into attacking together was a bit troublesome. They would heal themselves at every turn, and Duque was not sure if he could successfully use counterspell on the twin emperors. The burnt smell of the insect carcasses would definitely make people unable to needle on the gadget in his hand. Duque after half a day of bombardment and began to focus most of his attention on Queen also knew that they were no match for the Allied forces in the wilderness. It was rare that after fighting for so long, her rhythm was not messed up at all. Ordered. Every time he dodged, it was just came from the fortress control system. He didn't spend too much energy, and every time he dodged, even if it was just an unknown gravitational field, she would never let herself be in the danger of crashing again if forced to advance. She would never let herself expend too much energy. No one understood how this kind of exquisite, they could only speculate that movements could only be done by someone who used her agility to the extreme. Do we force an attack? Among the four Windrunner sisters, if there was one who had the best chance of breaking through to the level of demigod, it would definitely be Sylvanas. Is an ancient god after all. Talent was the Alliance too poor. Worked so hard to get a domain was already her limit. It would be terrible if Sasha it fell. Was very talented, next time, but it was a pity that she was too kind. Would let the Dalajan in terms of talent. Aurelia was on the same level. It was not easy to get such a powerful flying fortress. The problem was that she often considered if it really fell when faced with problems, the Alliance's advantage would be greatly too much about the big picture. After spending a whole day, weakness limited her on the path of battle and cranes to clear the passage behind the wall of beetles. Spirit, there were two huge areas in front of the Allied rebel of fate. The east side was the area that had been hit by Naxxramas. She was not willing to be a good wife and mother. She was not willing to be a country's powerful creatures detected there in a duke's mansion. The west side was the main building of the unwillingness that she became who she was now. I suggest we split into two groups. Otherwise, if we all attack one group to the demigod realm, make the other than Duque from the back, who had the help of the system elf to Magni and the other leaders of the Alliance, was a freak with extraordinary talents. It was true that the Alliance was to fight a real demigod in a battle of life and death. In the absence of Duke, although it was dangerous, Magni and William did not have enough power and prestige to suppress this and most hold absolute command in the Alliance. Even though both sides had tried their best to cooperate sincerely, his magic was suppressed by Duque. Magni and William looked at each other and understood each other's thoughts. Logically speaking, a melon that was any distraction or carelessness during a battle with Pharaoh then I'll have to trouble the horde to this was because it could affect the elemental guidance or the arrangement of incantations, Your Majesty, and Jaina could even destroy a forbidden spell. Jaina responded, blowing himself then up walked in front of Sal and handed him a 30-page was a weirdo. Document. With his mind on his sister, that Commander Duke Marcus came up with after consulting a lot of historical materials while his right hand made the casting gestures without the dragon and night elf commanders who participated in the war. He pulled out more things from the magic Grom's pupils, a replica of the curator, they were old made friends. Entirely of even if they had different standpoints. Duke's information was rarely wrong when it came to the Allied forces. This curator used a continuous rain of arcane missiles to clear a large wave of beetles as soon as he appeared. Duke for me. It wasn't just him. Nodded heavily. There was also a smaller frost dragon made of the purest that the records in the historical materials are not thin air. Facing the Demon King's shadow arrow rain head-on, for the rest, and opened its mouth to spit out an ultra-pure frost dragon emphasized. The benefits of Duke's she knew that Duke should have detailed information about the color of the fur as long as he could still connect to the magic net. But the Alliance was not elemental emissaries could command various elemental creatures from a safe place to might have given more detailed information to preserve the strength of the Allied forces. The Demon King Vekler could only rely on himself. The three Windwalker sisters were like arrows, furious roar, shooting toward the Demon King changed tactics. Those large-sized beetles the Alliance's no longer blindly rushed to their deaths. Also looked over there more with and more beetles began to climb onto his huge, the Courage insect people and skinny body. Thun, Duke who narrowed his eyes. Terrifying enemies. There was an indescribable feeling defeated. As expected, Sal was a little embarrassed, had come, but he didn't regret although he didn't know how they got their human recruited the Forsaken Duke into the Horde's camp. At least he had in this world of Azeroth. The former emperors were the emperors and the other Karaji insect people. The former Sun King and Astrian and the Silver Moon Council had all become death knights and liches. So the twin emperors were also if the alliance gave them a good attitude. Insects not that only worshipped their emperors, suggested splitting the army, also willing to give up their lives. Had agreed. The insects that turned pink or Anduin Lothar, who had defeated the Horde, the hardness of their control the situation. The ones that turned white were ice elemental, yellow were fire elemental, and violet were arcane elemental. The Alliance and the Horde never imagined that Vekler could use such a miraculous method other than pulling the Horde's main force. Physical defense and elemental absorption of steam tanks. Thrall simply asked for cover fire. The Alliance didn't dare to let in terms of communication with the elemental realm to get a tank division and two flying battleships. Now, the Skybreaker was left obviously pulled and the Flying Dutchman where it wasn't too great. Came up. As it turned out that the Allied forces were a little oversensitive. After they seemed to have realized that areas outside the protection even taller, becoming as power as a 10-story for the Alliance's artillery. Sylvanas naturally noticed the changes here. Intention of fighting the Alliance outside, and her whole body drove all the way to the main hall. Thousands of wriggling insects were climbing up. They stepped through the door, biting and devouring each other. Soldiers felt dizzy and vomited. Was challenging the limits of a woman's evil aura. Queen Sylvanas didn't have the luxury to pay attention to the Demon King, of the moon and she firmly believed that Duke could handle it better than her. It couldn't be used at all. On the other side, but if they wanted to use it, they would have to pay a higher price, turning himself into a below the level of a hero. Duque was a little dumbfounded. William waved his hand and ordered decisively, "You're forcing me to use my ultimate move." With the help originally of the wanted to leave it for your master. Barely managed to complete the evacuation. To say this without this rhyme isn't good. Or reason. If only the hero squad the can Demon enter, King was it'll be very troublesome if we get surrounded. Who knew that a minute had passed? Magni took off his helmet, had passed, scratched his head, 5 minutes had and passed. Put it back on. Even after the Gemini swapped positions 10 times, she pointed at the stairs. Nothing happened. Look carefully. Duque took advantage of his elemental purity and continued to attack like a tidal wave. If I'm not wrong, killing those with insufficient status aren't allowed to enter the main hall. Vekler used the insect's lives to fill in the gaps. Legs had pierced through the stairs countless times, and no matter how hard it was, it would be full of holes. It seemed that humans were divided into different levels, and so were insects. Along the way, it wasn't just ordinary insects that attacked them, was praying for his brother to kill Sylvanas. The 10-story tall monster, suddenly, the entire defender looked like a typical Egyptian dog-headed giant. It was like an earthquake. Not only did the feeling of the earth shaking with its heavy punches, it was a meter-deep underground after dying. How exaggerated was strategy? People would have died in minutes. All the Courage insect people were no strangers which looked a little like a sphinx and had a because it wasn't the first time. Could release the last time it was so energy shockwaves and mindlessly blow into the east side of the when the Alliance's hero squad fell back and forth in front of the Prophet's Scirum. It was repeatedly carefully looked through turning the side left behind by Duque. Could it be that the Alliance total of 3 warriors in again this time? There weren't many warriors who had stepped into the realm of heroes exclaimed at the same time. When Anduin Lothar was still around, Thun would all
never
he could
let
see were
Naxxramas
warriors
behave atrociously
ever since
in
there
his
were paladins
territory
who
again.
could fight,
In fact,
tank, and heal.
Naxxramas was
Most
really
of the
close to
alliances
the
melee
classes
classes
went to become
again.
paladins.
This time
Back
was
then,
different from the past.
5 silver saints were
time,
all warriors.
The floating fortress was purely a feint. Seeing
When
that his
asked
old
if
enemy
Gavin
was
Rad
coming
and the
again,
others could turn
how
back,
could
he said that he
keep
was
his
used to
face?
it and that it was
Without
not
saying
good
a
to turn
word,
back.
he first used
He had
a
no
moving
choice but
death
to let
ray.
Bulang
Different from the
Bronzebeard
time
run
back
back
to make a cameo.
Thuzad,
Bulang
under
put
Duque's
down his
orders,
beloved
the
shotgun,
dwarven craftsman
picked up his axe
carried
and
out
shield,
emergency
and used
modifications
charge.
to Naxxramas.
He looked pretty decent.
The biggest difference
Just
was
like
the
that,
addition
the
of a
eldest
set of
and
12
third
brother
large
of the
screw
Bronzebeard
engines.
family,
Although
as
this
well as
thing
William,
didn't have much
barely
effect
made
on
up
accelerating
warrior
the entire
tanks to
fortress.
tank the boss.
At a critical
As the
moment,
number one
a
in
difference
the
of 1 meter was
Divine
the
Temple,
difference between
Prophet
life and
Skirum's
death.
fighting style
Moreover,
wasn't too
the
disgusting.
main control system
Anyone
of the
who could
fortress
beat
was
Major
linked
Domo
to the
Major
magic
Domo
net.
in the molten
After
core
the warning
should be able
system
to deal with
detected the
him.
high energy
In theory,
reaction
this
rising
boss
from the
with a lower body
Karaj
like a
temple in
spider,
advance,
upper body
Duque
like a steamed
directly
lobster,
calculated the shooting
and a
range
cockroach
of
hanging on its chest
shouldn't be difficult to deal with,
and let the fortress
The problem
evade
was
in
that the
advance.
leader of the
Just like
Karaj
this,
Divine Temple
Naxxramas
wasn't stupid.
narrowly avoided
If he were to stand guard
Thun's
one by
ultimate
one,
move,
wouldn't he be
and
waiting
the
for
feint
the
attack
boss
was
to
to
come and
cover
kill
for
him?
another starfall?
It was as if he had
He didn't
poked the
believe
hornet's
that
nest.
see,
Almost
could
as soon
fire
as
such a
Magni rushed up
terrifying
to
light
fight
cannon
Skyrim,
continuously.
an evil energy
Under
wave
Duque's
suddenly
instigation,
spread out from
the
the
dragons
ground.
brought
The
down
range of
another
this wave was so
giant ship
wide
of
that
the
it
Burning
almost
Legion
covered an
as a
area the
meteorite.
size of at
In the
least
dark
10
starry
football
sky,
fields
a
in
red
front of
line
and
of
behind the
fire
main
stabbed
gate of
down
the temple.
diagonally.
Without
The
any
clouds
warning,
were boiling
the ground
like
within
porridge.
this area
From
collapsed.
afar, it
The
looked like a
majestic
huge
main
hall
marshmallow
of the
cloud.
Karaj Divine
Suddenly,
Temple,
a
red
red
dot
dot
appeared in the
dome
middle
that was the
like a
size of a
stone
battleship,
falling into water,
the thick stone
rippling on the
pillars that
clouds.
required 5 people
Then,
to wrap their
the
arms
clouds
around,
were dyed
and the
fiery
exquisite
red.
and beautiful
The next
hard
moment,
floor
under
tiles
Tyrant's
all
guidance,
collapsed.
the
This was
fiery
so
red
big
warship
that it left
fell to
all
the
the
ground.
Alliance
It
powerhouses
accurately
speechless.
hit the place where the
None
entrance
of the
of
Alliance
the
powerhouses
shrine
knew how
should
to
have been.
fly.
If
As
the
the
debris
debris
fell like
trapped
rain,
the Alliance
everyone
hero group was
screamed
deliberately
and
done by the
Watch
twin
my
emperors.
pseudo-levitation
Then the bombing
spell.
this time was Duque
Gavin
taking
Rad
advantage of
reacted
the situation.
immediately. The
He
opening,
waved his
which
wind
was not
sword,
very big in
and
the
the
first
strong
place,
wind from
was
the divine
forcibly
artifact
torn open
sword
in the
blew
direction
under
of the
everyone's
palace where the
feet.
twin emperors
It slightly supported
The earth was
everyone and
collapsing,
slowed down
and
their
the hard
falling
rocks
speed.
were easily
In
torn
theory,
apart.
they wouldn't die from the fall, but a new problem arose. Countless
Everyone's
rocks
falling
fell from the
speed
shocking
slowed
crack
down,
at the entrance
but
of
the
the
huge
temple
rocks above
once
them were
again
still
setting
falling
off a
at the same
terrifying
speed.
man-made earthquake.
For everyone who couldn't
After the
dodge in
violent
midair,
collapse,
this meant heavy
Lore
casualties.
suddenly discovered
Attack.
that he could see
The
the
Windrunner
sky.
sisters were
Originally,
the first to react.
the entire palace
three
was a
sisters
typical
suddenly
underground
twisted
cave.
their bodies and
now that
changed
the
their
entire
posture to
dome
be
had
upside
collapsed,
down so that
they
it
could
was
naturally
easier to
shoot
shoot
with
with
their
their
bows.
At this
The
moment,
arrows
Weak,
mixed with the
Lore,
power of
who was
wind
observing
and
the
lightning
skies,
rushed up
saw
and
a
smashed the rocks
resplendent
above
golden
them.
light shine
While
in
the
the skies
Windrunner
above.
sisters were covering
Normally,
them,
if it wasn't
everyone else
noon,
started to
there
summon
wouldn't
their
be any
flying
sunlight
mounts,
that could
pure
reach the
blood
bottom
fire
of the deep
eagles.
cave.
Bright
This light
flames
was
flew out of
obviously
everyone's
man-made.
hands and
Even
turned
if
into a
weak
huge
Lore
fire
died,
eagle
he
in the
wouldn't
blink
know
of
that
an
at
eye.
this moment.
Only
In the
when
orbit
the
of the planet
Firehawks
above
carried
on
the heroes
Karaj,
did the
there
situation
was a reflector
change a
made
little.
from a crystal
There's
mirror that
something
was
down
about
there.
2 kilometers long
Sasha's
and
eyes
wide.
were the sharpest.
This was naturally
Half
a
a second
product
later,
of black
she
technology
shouted,
that Duque
"Enemy!"
had asked the dragons to do. It's a
Sunlight
family
itself
of
didn't
3
have
and the
any
leader of
direct
the destructive
destructive
power.
A
But with
family
the
of
help of
3 was the
Alonso's
abbreviation
magic
of Lord
net and the
Carey,
processing
Princess
of forbidden
Yaj,
spells
and Vim.
Sunlight
They
had
were the
become
leaders
the
of
most
the
terrifying
3
weapon of
gigantic
mass
insects
destruction.
of different
An
sizes and
incomparably
colors.
thick golden
The
pillar
leader
of
that looked
light
like a
descended
sludge
from above
monster
the
was the
clouds,
aberration
piercing
monster,
through the entire
Vistus.
world. The
Don't go
clouds had
down,
long
it's a
been
trap.
swept away by the
William
meteorite,
was the first
but
to
now,
react.
under the
Don't
influence
act
of the
according
holy
to the
magic,
enemy's plan.
they slowly
This was
rotated
the
to form a
instinct of a
whirlpool.
commander.
The golden
Just as
pillars
everyone was
stabbed
about to
downwards,
fly up on
landing
their pure
straight
blood
into
fire
that
eagles,
gigantic
an
crack.
ear-piercing
The
buzzing
resplendent
sound
golden
came from
light
afar.
reflected in Duque's
Everyone was
dark
familiar
eyes
with
fell
this
along
sound.
the walls of the
It was
cave.
the buzzing sound
With
of
a confident
bees flying.
smile,
The
the golden
golden light penetrated deep into the ground and began to converge at the end, the first to rush out of the darkness on the body and enter the vision of the Alliance powerhouses was an huge green insect. Boom. There were many red spots continuous on her golden light spread from Huron, Lore's raised head to every corner of his body. Most of the people were suspended in midair. Lore's body aerial battles weren't something that mortals were good at. This time, if everyone had a pure blood obeying the Emperor's orders, it's because the elements on their bodies no one believed that a pure blood fire eagle that was only slightly stronger than a griffin would be a match for a flying insect like shadow element as his core. Suddenly receiving the strongest attack of the holy element, one person who didn't summon a pure blood fire eagle despite being supported by Gavinrad's gale, flesh and blood flew everywhere. And more tentacles, even if she was left alone, parts, she wouldn't fall to her death. Thorny limbs exploded into the air. The famous black dragon princess spread further. It was like a sharp knife cutting open a wrapping paper. Immediately,
Chapter
the true body of the demon emperor
Onyxia let out a long
was
howl,
revealed to
and
Duque,
a pair of
and
black
Queen
wings
Sylvanas
grew out of her bare back.
The once arrogant
Her
and skinny
forelimbs
turned into sharp
had
claws
lost
in the
his
blink of an
humanoid
eye,
appearance,
and her
what
smooth and
appeared
tender
before
skin
Duque
was
instantly
instantly
covered
covered
with
with
ugly
dense
and
twisted
solid bug.
scales.
Overall,
Her reddish
she
black
looked a little
robe
like a
instantly
silkworm,
turned into rags,
with countless
revealing
sharp,
her
colossal
thin
dragon
and stubby
body.
little legs.
A meteor hammer-like tail
look would
also
reveal
grew
that
out
each
of
of
her
his legs
was a beetle's
in just a
mouthpart,
breath's time,
and each
she had
spot
already
on his
completely
body
taken
was
on
the
the
living
form of
beetle's
a
eyeball.
colossal dragon.
Under the surprised gazes of the Alliance heroes,
Emperor
this colossal black dragon
was more like a monster made of
countless
size and
bugs
fearlessly
intertwining
charging
with each other.
forward.
Fortunately,
Well done.
in less than
Varian
half a second after Lore's glory was
William
revealed,
did not have a good
Alonso's
impression of
soul
Onyxia,
directly descended
the evil
beside
black dragon
Duque.
who had caused
His
him
full
so much
strength
trouble
caused
last
this
year,
disgusting
caused him to
scene to
split
become
into two,
extremely brief,
and even almost
amidst
gave up the
an
right to rule
earth-shattering
Stormwind City.
inhuman scream.
If the person who
That
claimed to
giant
have
bug
subdued her
amalgamation
wasn't Duke
suddenly
Marcus,
exploded,
whom he respected,
every
he
single
would have
tentacle,
immediately turned
every
hostile
single
and
horn,
forced the other
and
party
every
to
single
execute
hair
this
that was
black
like
dragon.
steel needles
Evil must
completely
be
exploded
eradicated.
apart and
His
transformed
ghost
into
wolf
specks of powder
personality
that
drove him to do so.
ordinary ants.
But now,
in the
everyone,
end, they didn't
including
even have
William,
the time
was
to flutter
extremely
down
glad
before
that
they
the
had
alliance
already
had
dispersed
dispersed
within the
a
golden
powerful
radiance.
colossal dragon
On
who
the other
didn't belong
side,
to the
the
dragon
sword
slumber
Emperor
shrine.
Vecnalis's
To help
triple
them.
slash had
Without
almost
her,
forced
the Alliance
Sylvanas
heroes
into a
would
dead
probably
end.
be beaten up.
At this moment,
Let's
the
fly
sword
up.
Emperor's
We
huge
can't let
body
Magni
suddenly
be up there
shrunk
alone,
rapidly.
William
In a
shouted.
short 3 seconds,
Under his command,
he had become an
the
empty bag
powerhouses
of
all
skin,
controlled the fire
collapsing on the
eagles to
ground.
dodge the falling
In the
rocks
surroundings,
and fly
all
up.
of the bugs wandering
Woo.
about on
At
the
this
ground
moment,
died.
another
They
existence
exploded one
rushed
after
out of the
another,
darkness
as
at
if a
high
rain
speed.
of blood had
From
fallen.
afar, it looked
Sylvanas
like a
turned
little
his head
elf
and
soaring
saw
among the
Duque
flowers.
standing proudly
She had the
within
appearance
golden
of a
light.
human, and
His
two pairs
expression
of
was normal,
transparent cicada
and his
wings.
black pupils
She
were
was
accompanied
covered with
by
a
a
white
white veil
smile.
and wore a low-cut
It was as if what he had
gown
just
that bound
killed
her
were
breasts.
not two demigods,
Didn't she look
but
very
two
beautiful?
ants.
Apart from the 2 horn-like giant bugs on her shoulders, the green claws that were curled up, and the pair of feet claws
Chapter
that only had 3
1323.
fingers.
He died just
If
like
that was
that?
the case,
Queen
she was indeed a
Sylvanas'
beauty.
face was still
The
frozen
problem
in
was that
disbelief.
everyone in the
Did we
Alliance
win?
knew that she was the leader
Duque
of
smiled
Ankh
as he
Karaj
walked over and
Sartura.
hooked Queen
She
Sylvanas'
used a
little nose.
brainless whirlwind
In order to
slash
fight
right from the
against
start.
my elemental
The
advantage,
formless wind blades easily
Lore
covered
almost
the
changed
entire
the
upper
attributes
floor.
of his
She
entire
did not
body to
participate
shadow.
in the battle
He was
between
gambling
Black
on the
Dragon
fact that
and
there was
Princess
no
Husura
strong
in
direct
sunlight.
She
in this
even
dark
took the
underground
initiative
palace.
to avoid the battle.
Obviously, he
Knowing
bet on
that
the
the
wrong
wind
bet.
blades of whirlwind
Queen
slash
Sylvanas
would not
was
be able
stunned
to
for a
hit the
moment
pure-blooded
before a bright
firehawk in the
smile
distance.
blossomed on her
She
face.
only did one thing.
You master
Block the
tacticians
entire
are all
airspace,
despicable,
forbidding the Alliance
Duque
from
was
flying up.
speechless. Not only
In
her,
history,
but more
Queen
Karaj
Sylvanas
insect
was a
people flew
ruthless
over.
person who had
They
no
took
choice
the risk
but
of
to
being
max
killed
out her
by
talent
falling
in
rocks
scheming.
and sealed off
It was
the
fine
entire
to be
airspace.
mocked by anyone
William's
but Queen
facial
Sylvanas.
muscles kept twitching
Duque
as he
was a
looked
little
at the sealed
displeased.
airspace again.
Wasn't this the same
Finally,
as a certain
he
master
squeezed out a
tactician
few
mocking
words
others
from between his
You
teeth.
guys are all
Let's go
dirty.
down. I'm
Don't
not going to
separate.
take the blame for this.
That's right.
All right. I'm just a little regretful.
He had no choice but
My
to go
great
down.
hero,
You
be it
can't be
Magni
so
or
petty.
Onyxia,
They
as
were
she
both
spoke,
people who could
two
hold
fair
their
arms
arms
had
had
already
already
wrapped
wrapped
around him. He could
On
only
her
wish them
perfect
luck.
smiling face,
After he
her
made up his
long
mind,
and curly
the things he
eyelashes
had
had
to do
already
became
drooped.
much clearer.
With such
At
benefits,
first glance,
all of
this was a
Duque's
huge
complaints
cave with a
disappeared.
depth of more than
He
a kilometer.
decisively went up
In
to
the
taste
vast
Queen
dark
Sylvanas'
space,
little
there were
tongue.
plenty of places for the flying
After an
insects to
unknown
soar
period
and
of
attack
time,
back and forth.
the two of them were awakened
Outside,
by the sound
they could
of
have the
footsteps
support
from
of the
afar.
Alliance's cannons. You guys
However,
are having
in
fun.
this cave,
there were
still
leader-level
beads of sweat
insects on
the
Aurelia's
ground,
temples,
and they had
as
to
she
be
rushed
wary
over.
of the enemies that
Evidently,
swooped down from
she had
time
rushed
to time.
over after
Needless
fighting
to
the
say,
family of 3.
annihilation was
Of
the
course,
only outcome.
as the eldest
We
sister
have to
of
find
the Function
cover.
family, she
William
would only
shouted.
pretend to be angry
There.
when she saw this scene.
Queen Sylvanas
Behind
raised her
Aurelia
hand,
were the
and
other
a
members
lightning
of the
arrow
hero
shot
team.
over.
No
Along
one would
with the
blame
lightning,
Duque for
everyone
not coming
saw
over
that
to
it was
help
a
after the
huge
fight.
hole in midair.
Duque had
The
already
hole was
fought
about
the
2
strongest
stories
enemy,
high,
and could
if they
allow
couldn't
4
even deal
carriages
with an
to pass
ordinary
through
leader,
side by
they
side.
wouldn't be qualified
However,
to stay
for
in
the
the
current
hero situation where there were enemies all around,
was the last
already
to end,
the best
and it was
place to
rather
hide.
pathetic.
No matter how
Many
bad
of them
it
had
was,
sustained
it was better
injuries
than
that were
directly
neither
falling
light
into
nor
the
heavy.
mouths of a family
What made
of
him
3.
feel even worse
It was at this
that
moment that
Anixia
Thea had
had
actually
swooped
run
down.
over to ask
As
if
she
he needed
swept
help
past,
after getting
she
rid of
activated
Princess
a
Huron.
powerful whirlwind
On the
slash.
surface, she
The
seemed to be
violent wind
well-intentioned,
blades easily
but from the
scattered
tone of the
Alliance's
of the
flying
Black
formation.
Dragon's teasing
Brawl
tone,
Bearhide's
it was clear that
Firehawk
she would
couldn't
help
dodge
as
in
long
time,
as William
and was
asked.
killed by the whirlwind
However,
slash
it
on
was
the spot.
unknown if she
If
would
he
say
hadn't
something
instantly
behind his back.
transformed into a
William
giant
didn't
bear with
reply
thick skin
immediately.
and flesh.
Instead,
He would probably
he
have
asked
died
about
as well.
everyone's
Grab
situation.
my hand.
When he found out
As
that
the
his
other
group
main
was the
force
last
of king
to fight,
was Iron
he made an
Triangle,
interesting choice.
Valera barely
He
managed to
wanted
save
Anixia
Brawl.
to hold the
No,
line, But
we
he
have
wanted
to do
the members
something.
in the cave to rely
William
on
shouted.
their own strength
Duke
to finish off the tenacious Van
Jaina
Karis.
couldn't help but shout
Looking
in
at the
weave.
battered William
If
and
possible,
the rest walking
Duke
towards him,
wanted to spend
Duke
more
nodded
time
slightly.
perfecting his weave.
William took the
He had
initiative
never
and
thought
said
that his weave
"I'm
would have to
sorry,
undergo a
it
test
seems like
so
I made the
soon."
wrong choice. Spellcasters who were connected to the weave could contact it, but most
Because
of
of
their
my
requests
decision,
would be
the
ignored.
Alliance's hero
Duke
team
wasn't
was
a super
nearly wiped
operator
out.
with 1,000
Duke
brains.
shook his head.
In order to maintain
No,
the
there's
newborn
no
weave,
right choice
his
in this
system
world.
elves were
The
almost
so-called
operating at
correctness
full
was just a
capacity.
theory of results.
However, this
In that
voice couldn't
chaotic
be ignored by
situation,
Duque,
since
because
Magni
the
wasn't
one calling
around
him was
and
Jaina.
you took over the command
Duque,
and made the choice.
I need your
You
magical
are a qualified
support,
leader,
the kind that
Actually,
can instantly
I'm quite
annihilate
curious.
thousands of
Why
flying
didn't you
insects.
accept Anixia's help
Alright,
just now?
Duque's direct
This,
reply in the weave
William
made
had
Jaina
a strange
overjoyed.
expression on his
Communication through divine
If the
will
situation
was
was
the most
dire,
direct. I would,
in just
even
half
if
a
she was
second,
said to be a
Duque
sinister
understood
black
the whole
dragon
story.
who would betray us
Damn
at
it.
any time. Mere insects.
Do you think you're an
Anixia
eel?
snorted
You
coldly
even dared
behind
to touch
Duque.
my girl?
If it was
The
her
entire
master
weave
or
was
someone
responding
else,
to its
I wouldn't
owner's
be at
anger.
ease with her. Apart from
Since
the
it was
flapping
Uncle
of the
Duque,
flying
the
insect's
savior of
wings,
Stormwind,
there shouldn't be
I
too
definitely
many other
approve of your
sounds in
decision.
the void. Moreover,
Suddenly,
the
it was as if
situation
the
was
darkness
already
would
stable
split
at that
open at
time,
any time,
so I
and
would
the sun
rather
would
let
jump out.
everyone have a better experience.
A
The
wise
rocks
choice.
and sand around the
Duque
fire
praised
eagle that
sincerely.
should have been falling
You're
at a
starting
higher
to
speed
become an
seemed to have
outstanding
broken
leader.
free from the
William
restraints of
nodded
gravity
humbly
and sputtered
Thank
horizontally.
you, Uncle Duque.
A terrifying
Actually,
aura
I would
with
like to
great
consult
majesty
you,
rose
who
from
is known
behind
as the
Jaina and
greatest
Lucia,
strategist in the
and the
history
insects
of the
that were
Alliance.
flying in the air
What's
started
a better
to cry
way
out
to break
strangely.
the other party's
They
conspiracy?
screamed, wanting
As
to
an
get
elder,
close to the two
Duque
female
explained to William in
spellcasters and get
detail.
rid of them
When
first.
the other party has
However,
obviously set up a
formless
trap as a
elemental
leader,
wave swept
the first
across
thing
the
to
void.
do is to make a
It was as if there
decisive
was
decision.
a pair of gigantic
Being
air palms
overcautious
above
and not
below
doing
that
anything
suddenly
is the
pressed
worst.
down on all the
As
insects,
long as you make a
causing
decision,
them to hover
even if
in the
it's a
air.
wrong decision,
They couldn't
it's
move
better
up
than
nor
doing
down,
nothing
nor
and letting
could they
the team
advance
follow
nor
the other
retreat.
party's ideas
They were
and
stuck
let
there
the situation
awkwardly,
develop.
becoming pitiful
Duque
live
continued.
targets. Be it
In the
strategy
next
or
instant,
tactics,
the darkness
they are
around
all
the two
psychological
female
games.
spellcasters suddenly
There was no
parted,
such thing
and a
as an
dazzling
absolute
white
mental
light
model.
lit up the entire
If you have a
dark
deeper
cave
understanding
like the
of the
first
enemy,
snowfall of
but
winter,
the enemy doesn't know
reflected
anything
in
about
everyone's
you,
eyes
then
were
you've
countless
already
rays
won
of
half
pure
of the
white
battle.
light
Piercing through
Then,
the vast
Uncle
darkness
Duque,
of the void.
why are you always
It was
able
as
to
if the
use all
heavenly
kinds
river
of
was flowing
exaggerated
in
methods
reverse,
to deal with the
attacking
enemy?
from below
That's
towards the
because I'm a
sky?
transmigrator.
Blizzard?
Cuff, cuff.
This
Duke
was more than
lectured
a
with a
thousand
straight face.
top-notch.
I have
frost
always
arrows.
used strange ideas
In theory,
to defeat my
this would
enemies,
require at least
because I have
1,000
jumped out of
radiant
the enemy's
moon
archmages
thinking.
at the same time.
At the same time,
each casting
I have
for
a broader
vision
than
5
the enemy.
seconds.
That's why
However,
I can always
with the
win.
support of the weave,
I've never been the
Jaina
most
and
outstanding
easily
one.
achieved this.
I'm only a little
The
better than
blooming
the enemy.
flower of ice was like a
I
blooming
also know
white
that what I
chrysanthemum.
lack the most is experience, but since my subjects have high expectations of me, I want to avoid detours
Chapter
as much as
1311.
possible. Do you have
In
any good
midair,
ideas
apart
or
from
good
Sartura
guidelines?
and Princess
You don't
Huron,
say, there
who was
really
fighting
is.
fiercely
I
at
found
a
this
higher
rather
altitude.
interesting book on
Every
the art of
single
war
Koraj
in
flying
Medivh's
insect
library
was completely
I'll give
torn
it to you
into
today.
pieces after a
I
sharp
hope you can read it and
sound.
read it thoroughly.
Their long shins,
With that, sharp
the
claws,
sage-like
and
Dumuk
sharp
solemnly
mouth
took
parts
out
were
an
all
ancient
broken
book
and
that
scattered
had
in
been
the air.
specially dyed
In
yellow
less than
with
half a
soy
second,
sauce,
they would
washed
turn
and
into
dried.
ice and fall to the
What
ground
book is
along
this?
with the mud falling
William's
from the
eyes
sky.
widened.
In an instant, it was as if the entire world had become quiet.
Under the watchful
Not to
eyes
mention
of Valilla
Sartura,
and Brawl,
even
he
Princess
caressed the
Huron
cover
and her
slowly
family
opened
opened
the first page.
Inside
He looked
the
at the
Karazhan,
strange square
Duke
words
spat
and was
on the
extremely
ground.
confused.
Tisk.
Oh,
The
I
magic
forgot that
net
you
was
don't
built
know
with
any
the
languages
languages
other
other
than
than
the
the
common
common
language
language
and
and
Darnassus.
as the core nodes.
For this
In
day,
the An-Karaj
I've prepared
temple,
my
see,
translation for you.
Thun had used
Duque
some
took out
mysterious
a
power
newly
to
written
resist the
translation
magic
in the
net's
common
coverage.
language.
The wave of
Sun
Jaina's
Tzu's
power
art of
just
war,
now was
how
also
to get
the
more
last wave.
grandchildren.
Right
Before
first,
the magic
you have
net
to find
was
100
forcefully cut
beauties
off,
who are willing
Duque
to have
sent
sent
a
a
message
message
to Jaina.
Give birth
Hold
to
on,
1,000
I have
children,
to save
and
Magni
then,
first.
Before
In
William
reality,
could finish
before
reading,
the magic
Duque
net was
snatched the
completed,
book back
Duque's
at lightning
advancement
speed.
had already been
You're
completed.
mistaken.
He
This
had
is
wanted
the
to
book.
spend more time
Duque
to build a
took out
better
another
foundation.
translation direction of
Unfortunately,
Sun Tzu's
the
Art of
Allied
War.
forces would not
He could
stop
clearly
advancing
feel
to
more
wait
than
for
10
him.
shy and
Previously,
angry gazes from
Tyron
all
had
around him.
purposely slowed down
War
the progress
is a matter
at the
of
cost
great
of human
importance
lives.
to a country. Sometimes
It's
it
the
was like
land
this.
of life and death.
When the situation
The
was
path of
pressing,
survival.
only those who
It
could
must
grow
be
faster
examined.
under the pressure
Although
would
it was
be
a
able
little
to
hard
carve
to
out a
understand
bloody
after
path
William
in the
read it
face
out,
of adversity.
it was more than 100 times more
I'll go to
pretentious
Anchorage
in an instant.
I'll leave the magic net to you for now, Duque instructed.
Master, the problem is that there are more and more requests to connect.
Chapter 1324
frowned. Sun Tzu's Art of War was a top-notch work that revealed the laws of competition. Now that the magic net is newly built, that had never been seen in the world of the spellcaster's mind and soul. When a series of profound strategic times they can use the magic net to conquer strength, using softness to conquer strength, bared his teeth, winning without fighting. Although adding a usage limit, William was quickly a considerate measure for new spellcasters. The profound philosophical concepts through the dilemma of not having enough mana in the magic net and the unity of man and nature. If Duque were to go personally, it would probably be a huge mana overdraft. Traveled to this world. If the influence of this masterpiece, the lackeys would naturally have to run their country. Many famous and the other elemental emissaries looked at each other and saw the bitter traditional strategic culture of China. You don't need to say anything. Not only did this masterpiece transcend national boundaries, but it also transcended time and narrow teleportation. As British Air Marshal John Slessor said in China's military maxim, this portal was narrower than usual, giving off how amazingly up-to-date his ideas were not playing tricks on him. By changing some of the words used to break through space, his maxim seems to have been written yesterday. Divine Temple was this masterpiece was no longer simply as a work of war. God. Of course, it had become a must he wouldn't let his enemies come and go as they pleased. Economics, you want to open a portal to enter? Sun Tzu's ideas were not only widely used in the modern military field, but also in politics. The space attribute of the drumstick wasn't just for show. For the unpleasant calling of the three had been explained in detail by Duque in the common language, void and William was almost instantly sure that this was the legendary Holy Bible. Flaw. Looking at this Holy Bible, beyond William's divine disappointment from making the wrong choice was immediately no one would be able to open a portal to enter. His eyes contained a brighter light than before, reliable as if there was a raging flame burning in them. And turned the large area of the divine temple into the ruins of even the other kings had come over to watch. It was only when Duque slapped William and Magni's shoulders that they snapped out of the flaw later on. Alright, it could still be considered a flaw. Thun is not dead yet. This was a flaw that even a normal Breaking Dawn archmage couldn't exploit. William would have asked immediately why they didn't just kill him in one go. Stretched out his right hand. The concept of retreating in order to advance that he had just miles away, strongly an identical but larger arcane energy palm appeared and tore open the hole in a consensus layer with one hand. Without giving allied Thun any time to react, the ancient Duque's main body directly stepped into the portal and definitely go over at high speed together. On the other side, even with the demigod like Duque was being overseeing things, the area that he was in had already collapsed. After all, but the problem was that before he fell, Thun's strength had used its two claws hidden under its rose-red sleeves one of which sent Naxxramas flying and the other of which blew up a small part of Naxxramas. The battle was clear that the power of this ancient evil god was not Balrog's hammer. Of course, Magni relied on the gods could directly charge into the lowest level of the Ankh temple without waiting for the tribes. When Magni really took out a quarter of this lobster-shaped monster boss he might even be able to take advantage of every time before he lost a quarter of its HP. But so what if he would create two doppelgangers? They might be able to obtain some as long as there was no one next to the main body that the Alliance's experts would mindlessly throw. It was precisely because the Alliance was stronger than the Horde in terms of magic quantity and quality of experts, as well as national and military power, that the Alliance was able to form an allied army. The three main tanks would pull the main body and the doppelganger, too much, and everyone would concentrate their firepower to kill the doppelganger understood first. Why Duque wanted to retreat first. Doppelganger's attack power was even higher than the main body. Go out and inform the vanguard of the allied army to retreat immediately from the wall of the beetles to the doppelgangers, and they were running all over the street. Prepare to use continuous artillery fire 24 hours a day to cover the road from the wall of beetles to the Ankh-Raj ruins. If it caught up, it would teleport away, as soon as the Alliance heroes returned to Naxxramas. There were a few times when Magni wanted to leave and find a hole, broke out, or even dig a hole himself and fall in. Damn it! But he found that the ground was extremely solid, on the floating fortress, and he was at least 1,000 meters away from the main door of the temple. He could only miserably run around with Skyrim, and then the loudest sound of artillery fire rang out. No one could figure out whether the sound of the artillery had alarmed a swarm, it would be time for him to die in battle. The artillery fire. Just at this moment, almost at the same time as the artillery shells rained down on the Ankh-Raj temple, that dazzling light was like the light of the birth of all from every corner of the temple. Perhaps the life on Earth came from sunlight, and it was incompatible with the carpet that covered the entire ground. But this ball of yellow earth people a feeling that it was constantly shaking black color. At that moment, they rushed out of the temple and formed a huge wall that was like a wave.
It was as if there was no other color in the world. Quickly, even ignoring the cries of their companions. A crack in space that wasn't very wide was that ran torn to the bottom and became whether or not they would be trampled to death. Door. No one knew. A man in a blue and white magic robe walked out. Didn't want to retreat because retreating meant that the horde himself at him with tears would be cut off. Duque's eyelids twitched. Duque's words dispelled his thoughts. Duque, sound like I don't doubt your loyalty to the chief at all, feel like but it's not like you haven't seen an insect swarm before. How long do you think your army can last in front of this tide? Duque kicked Magni, do you want to kill the last elites of the horde? Leg after he had dispelled God's insects, we can still get Sal and when there were comrades standing behind him that needed his protection. Thun Magni was the most reliable warrior. The interests of the alliance and the horde will be the same. Heaven to the left and warriors to the right. Few seconds with his ridiculously hard body. The horde retreated. However, in the face of a demigod like Duke, Mag actually opened fire on every aisle in the direction of the Karaj temple, every place that wasn't under the protection of sea, Thun's power. The insects were charging with King regard for their own lives. Perhaps he was trying to conserve his artillery, was also covering the area. He had to leave a useful body for the next battle. This burly dwarf took out a tower shield that was originally like a surging it on his back. Didn't even have time to form to a shield in his left hand and a hammer in his right. To pieces by the alliance's superior artillery. If he didn't have the entire world seemed to be filled with the lies and decided not to bother with this guy anymore. As the cannon king of the alliance, he spread out his spirit bronze beard and sensed that although Jaina and the others were in a sorry state, they were fine. Prioritized the incendiary bombs, then the explosive bombs. All right. Although I don't know who taught you to divide and annihilate bombs, but since you're so good at it to run out of bombs, I can't hold back. Sir Duke deal with you quickly and meet up with the others. For mages. Suddenly, he will open a portal for us to replenish our ammunition. In the command center, after letting Khadgar help with the matter of the portal, he didn't have much of an impression after fighting so many times. He said to Varrock and Magni, this guy wasn't strong and hadn't been wiped out many times. Thun's power shield has shrunk. Thun is already more than 10,000 years old. Are you sure you want to wish him long live? Could cover the entire Duque laughed shamelessly and made his move. But now it only covered the main hall of the temple. Faster than Duque. Other places, he instinctively sensed that the elemental state around Duque wasn't right. So he didn't choose to use magic burst. Because our alliance's hero squad let his main body and doppelganger release great earthquake strike. Duque raised his palm. And two souls that looked like little people had obviously held back just now. Even though these two souls had been imprisoned by nature hit him, he instinctively realized that if he was in his normal state, he would definitely be sent flying by this force. This is the souls of the twin was already a good thing. The emperor of the thing was to be hit by three and also the leader of the swarm at the same time. After losing them, that scene would probably be like a pile driver. No longer control the would become a pillar and be driven deep into the ground. So he simply sent all the low-level insects to their deaths. Duque You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. He saw that Duque did not make any extra support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us into the void. Incredible journey through captivating sound of wind whistling. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. Any big movements, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. In that instant, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure of the entire world. It was as if the entire cycle of life and death was within his grasp. Bang! A loud The purple radiance of Magic Burst immediately lit up on the main body and the two doppelgangers. Duque laughed shamelessly. Sure enough, monsters are monsters? Or is it that those who aren't in human form have lower intelligence? Bang! Bang! The arcane energy explosion that enveloped Skirum's body suddenly stopped. The purplish-blue radiance on the three guys' bodies all rushed out uncontrollably and condensed into hundreds of arcane missiles in midair. In an instant, they shot back at their own bodies. Then Mag heard bang, bang. Two shattering sounds rang out, and the two boss doppelgangers that had been bothering him for a long time exploded. Impossible! Skirum shouted. Impossible? Duque smiled. Idiot! Let me tell you. If I can't enter the divine domain as the god of magic, then I will settle for the next best thing, and become a god as the god of arcane magic. After teasing for a while, Duque didn't waste any more words and directly pointed at the index and middle fingers of his right hand. Chirp! A sound rang out. Duque's fingers seemed to extend infinitely. Of course, it wasn't that Duque's fingers became longer, but the arcane energy instantly shot out from his fingertips. It was hard to describe whether it was an arcane missile or an arcane sword. The arcane elemental light that shot out was incredibly fast, and in less than 1/100th of a second, it pierced Skirum's throat. It was clearly magic, but it was no less cold than any divine sword in the world. This was both magic and a long sword condensed from magic. The sword light was full of killing intent, and the momentum of the sword could pierce through any hard shell that wasn't protected by divinity. Clang! At the moment when Duque's long arcane sword pierced Skirum's throat, Skirum, who was a general undersea, Thun, finally reacted at the critical moment. The huge red pauldrons, no, it should be a part of its body, the hard shell on the left and right shoulders, suddenly closed. The solid shell locked the incoming sword edge, so that the long arcane sword couldn't move an inch. Ha! Duque's 2 fingers bent slightly, and then poked out again. Obviously, Duque didn't reveal any emotion, but Magni, who was next to him, had a completely different feeling. He seemed to hear the sound of a sword resounding through the world, and a terrifying killing intent surged. The pure arcane energy burst out like a flood. Duque's calmness formed a sharp contrast with Skirum's and Magni's nervousness. Clang! The long sword that seemed to have been locked a moment ago became 2 sharper arcane daggers in the next instant. This time, the hard shell couldn't stop it anymore, and the 2 more agile energy daggers pierced through with unparalleled force. There was no time to dodge, let alone block. There was only a "pu" sound, and the 2 daggers pierced Skirum's throat in an instant.